It's Christopher Reeve's last outing as the Man of Steel, and Lex Luthor's return with his goofy nephew to teach us all about Nuclear Man. Yeah, this one's pretty notorious and often shows up in lists of the worst films ever made. So join us for Superman 4, The Quest for Peace. Welcome everyone to the Collector's Cut. I am Peter, and joining me as always is David.
Nobody wants war. I just want to keep the thread alive.
This is a movie podcast, and we are working through Superman season, and we have hit the 4th week of Superman season, which means that we are questing for some peace. That's right, Superman 4, The Quest for Peace is today's movie.
Well, I'm so happy we made it here. I'm so happy that the Superman franchise gets to get dragged through this.
I was going to say I like this more than the next one we're going to have to do.
Really? I don't even remember. I saw Returns once, and it did not stick with me at all. So
Exactly.
I have no idea my opinions.
Yeah, I'm not saying this is good, but like at least it's something.
Yeah, that's
Returns
fair.
is just a empty, hollow shell. This has weird aspirations, if nothing else, regardless of the outcome. So we'll get into it. We will start spoiler free, of course, as we always do. We'll give you warning before we get into the spoilers. If you're enjoying the show on YouTube, please do hit the like button. Helps us out a bunch. And of course, you can get bonus content and help support the show over at Patreon. But I'll tell you more about that at the end of the episode. So, yeah, this is Superman 4, which has got a notorious reputation. I even joked as I was watching it that this is an Extra Reels worthy show or movie. That Extra Reels, of course, if you don't know, is our Patreon show where we do some of the worst things ever made. And this movie definitely has that reputation of being one of the worst movies ever made. Having said that, I will say, as I was watching it, I did have the thought that people who think this is one of the worst movies ever made have never seen a really bad movie. Like, they've not seen what I've seen if they think this is in the worst 10 ever made, because it isn't.
Yeah. It's one of those things where this definitely had a lot more exposure than most of the movies that we would consider worst ever made. This is something that actually managed to get in front of audiences and be legitimately bad, which would explain why so many people think that it's the worst movie ever made, because they had never seen the bottom of the barrel gutter trash that we subject ourselves to regularly. But it's nowhere close. It's not even a question that this is miles ahead of any of that.
It's not even in the bottom 100. I'm pretty confident in saying that. Just based on the Neil Breen films I've seen, based on A Talking Cat, based on Paradise Motel, like, seriously, there is worse than this.
I mean, if you add together the total filmography of, like, Uwe Boll, Neil Breen, I would add in Dave Dakota, at least the most recent stuff. Like, we're already over 100. Like, there's no way this is under any of that.
Yeah. Now, is it better or worse than the movie we did for Extra Reels for this month, Steel? That's a question that
that's
maybe
debatable.
We'll come back to that at the end of this movie and have a little discussion about that. But we'll get into it. It's notable to mention here that between Superman 3 and 4, they made Supergirl. Now, we didn't do that for this season because there's a new Supergirl movie coming out next year, so we're saving Supergirl to go with that as a nice little pairing. So we'll see that next time. But just worth mentioning that they did do that in between 3 and 4.
Yes.
So, and this is the one that's kind of licensed out to another company to actually make. Warner Brothers still distributed it as far as I know, but it's Canon Globus who is the actual production company. And they were known for being cheap and making cheap movies.
I feel like from what I understand about Canon, Canon has a much more audience, a bigger audience with horror movie people. Like, I always hear about, like, Canon's Dracula and stuff like that. Is that something you're more familiar with, having a horror background?
I think you're mixing this up with Hammer or something like that.
Oh, maybe I am Hammer.
Because
that sounds familiar.
Yeah, Canon aren't known for horror movies. Canon did Chuck Norris movies and action movies. That was the type of stuff that Canon did.
That's where it's coming from.
Typically.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they didn't do any horror, but I think when I think of Canon, I think of action, maybe exploitation, and maybe a little sci-fi thrown in, but mostly action. So,
fair enough.
Yeah.
That's just me completely forgetting.
Yeah, I think you could probably look in my eyes there as you said a Cannon's Dracula and saw my eyes do that. Like, wait, what the hell did he just say? Cannon's Dracula?
Yeah. I mean, Hammer, Cannon, it's all the same. I am looking up their filmography here, and I do see a decent amount of things that at least sound like horror films. I see the Northville Cemetery Massacre, Silent Night, Bloody Night. So
I think I've seen that one.
Have a little of that. Yeah,
I think I've seen
but
that.
It doesn't seem to be the vast majority.
No, I don't think it was what they were mainly known for. Again, if they could make a cheap movie in this era, then they probably did. I'm sure there's some horror ones, but that's definitely not what I think of first when I think of Cannon. So say that out of the way, first of all. And then the other weird thing to note about this is that Christopher Reeve was very hands-on with this one and actually has a story by credit because he wanted to help develop what the story was. He wanted to have the film tackle some big subjects, and we're definitely going to see kind of at least what his intention was in the final movie, how much it kind of stuck to what his hope was for it. That's maybe open for discussion, but and that's why I mean, though, when I say that there is some aspiration, there's some intention here. Like, as bad as this is in a lot of ways and as silly as a lot of it is, and the execution is what it is, it doesn't feel like someone just blindly throwing punches. There was a target in mind that someone was trying to hit, which inherently makes it more interesting to me than I don't know, we compare it to I don't know, lots of other movies.
I feel like it was saying like an Uwe Boll film or something like that. Something where it is like, just get it for the money.
Sure. I'm trying to think of something a bit closer in terms of like another superhero movie or something. Like,
okay.
You know, like Fan Stick. Like this is a more interesting film than Fan Stick, I guess.
That's fair.
But hey, anyway,
I mean, from everything I've read about it, this movie primarily was, as you were saying, Cannon likes doing cheaper stuff. This movie's problems all kind of stem from they ran out of money. Like, they had these ideas, they had something they were aiming for, they had these big things, but ultimately it was like, okay, we're out of money, get it to the editing bay and see what we can make work out of this, and this is what we ended up with.
Yeah, is this one that you had seen all of, or is this like another one where you'd seen bits and pieces?
Yeah. I've seen bits and pieces. I've seen someone made a supercut of all of the different times that the villain, who I won't name yet, because obviously we'll have a big reveal of that, and the times that Superman were flying, and how they reused the exact same footage about 24 times, if not more, just back to back to back. It really shows you exactly what the production value on this movie was.
Yes. The villain played by Mark Pillow, which is a hell of a name.
Yes.
So Gene Hackman's back in this one as Lex Luthor. Margot Kidder's back as Lois Lane. She has a bigger role than she did in the last one, so that's something. We also have John Cryer as Lexi's nephew, Lenny.
Dude, his name popped up in the opening credits, and I thought, that must be a different John Cryer. There's no way that's the same John Cryer. And then he shows up, and he's just John Cryer.
Did you not know that they brought him in to play Lex and the CW stuff?
Here's the thing. This movie progressed, and it got to be like, I don't know, 15 minutes into John Cryer being in this movie. And I was like, oh, son of a bitch, Arrow pulled him back. That's right. Yeah. Or Arrowverse, I should say. I was like, they made it a connection. I was always wondering why John Cryer was Lex Luthor. It didn't really seem to fit with what I knew about Lex.
It's another one of those legacy, like, nostalgia pulls from Superman 4, of all things. But hey,
not where you want to pull from.
That never stopped him. Never stopped him before. So yeah, we'll get into everything, but we'll just start with a simple question. David, what did you think of Superman 4, The Quest for Peace?
I don't like it. I don't like it. I don't like many aspects of it. So Superman 3, I think we came in with the big asterisk of it's not a good Superman movie, but it does have something going for it. There's as a comedy, it's not like inherently bad or anything like that. This one is a bit stranger to try to classify in that way. I don't think it's good in just a general sense, but I can see the underlying Superman story being told. It felt like it was closer to what a Superman story would be than 3 was.
Yes.
But it was just a bad movie. It, like, production value tanked so hard between 3 and 4 that it just couldn't escape that to begin with. So I think that's kind of where I'm standing, in that in terms of being a Superman movie, it's closer, but it is still just a bad movie.
Yeah, I don't know if I'd go as far to say it's a good Superman story but a bad movie, because that's maybe giving it a bit too much credit, but it's trying to be a good Superman story and is a bad movie, whereas Superman 3 is kind of a bad Superman story for the most part, but has some interesting qualities that make it, again, good might be a strong word. That said, though, I don't think that... Oh, I hit my mic. I don't think that this is that unpleasant a watch. I mean, part of it's that it's 90 minutes, and it keeps brisk, it keeps moving. You can't really fault that. But I mean, first of all, Christopher Reeve is still excellent as Superman, right? I mean, like, that's not changed. He's still great at it. There's still weird story choices and all these other things, but he is still very good. And there's little moments sprinkled in throughout that still make me want to root for him, and that's really nice. So that's cool. I do think its bad qualities are mostly kind of entertaining. I mean, bad, yes. Like, you know, it's easy to make fun of a lot of it, but it's funny bad for the most part. Right. You can laugh at it, you can joke around, you can be entertained by the campiness of some of the stuff that they have the villain do and say and how that all plays out. You can still enjoy Gene Hackman kind of chewing the scenery, and he's still entertaining at doing that. Like, it's kind of a weird thing where, yeah, obviously it's bad. I'm never going to defend it and say it's not a bad movie, because obviously it is. And there's definitely some wild decisions in here. And wild, just random new little superpowers that he has every so often that, as a Superman fan, piss me off to no end.
Yeah.
But it's a very easy watch that's not that torturous to get through. Like, there's so many movies that I would find more dull to sit through than Superman 4. And, you know, I take that for what it's worth. I don't know what it is worth, but it's worth something.
I think that's probably worthy of being on the box for the VHS. That's like the highest praise they've ever gotten.
Yeah, I guess to go back to something I said earlier, is I was thinking about how this technically, most people would think, oh, this is, if it wasn't part of a season, it would be a worthwhile movie to be on extra reels. But honestly, watching it, I'm like, I mean, it kind of is by reputation, but I don't think it actually feels like it belongs with a lot of the other stuff that's on extra reels.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Extra Reels has managed to, like we were saying at the beginning, it scrapes that bottom of the barrel. This isn't that. There's no way that this is... I would kind of put it not at the same level, but in a similar sort of vein of Suburban Commando. We did that on Extra Reels, and we were kind of throughout the whole time saying, like, this isn't good, but it's not, like, the worst thing we've ever seen. Like, there are qualities to it that are there, and I feel like that's kind of where I'm coming at with this one, where, again, it feels like there's good ideas sprinkled throughout. I'm curious how much of this was Christopher Reeve, like, really pushing for it, and how much was just a story they had on hand, but in the end, it really does come down to, it feels like their eyes were bigger than their wallet. They had so many ideas, and then in the end they were like, oh, wait, but that's going to cost X amount of dollars. We only have X divided by 10. So do something else. Yeah,
that's basically what it comes down to. I mean, it's not the only thing, but it's just a big part of what it comes down to. Because there's definitely some weird, like, just ignoring of basic physics in this movie that is just wild to... And it's not like these other films haven't been guilty of it, but this one's especially notorious and guilty of many sins when it comes to that side of things. And then, you know, like, it's... There's definitely, like, I think in the third act, when it sort of jumps into, okay, Superman's actually fighting the villain, there's some weird leaping that happens where it feels like the characters already know a bunch of things that they have no reason to know already. But we know as the audience, because we've seen, like, you know, both sides of the plot play out, but there's no reason why Superman should know X and Y, but he does, and the only thing I can assume is they either didn't shoot those scenes, or they cut them for time, or something, right? Either way, you know, like, because I mean, the example I give without getting into too much context is that the villain's looking for a woman, and Superman seems to know that he's looking for a woman, this woman, except there's no reason why he should know that he's looking for that woman, because the villain just saw a photo of her and the like 2 seconds earlier and decided, I want me a bit of that, and that's what set him off to go do such a thing. But somehow Superman already knows that he's looking for, you know, this specific person. It's just baffling, just weird little things like that all throughout the movie. So anyway,
no, I think that the first half of this movie, I don't want to assume they filmed sequentially, but I feel like the first half of this movie was a lot more cohesive and made sense from like an A to B than the back half. So it feels like they did kind of film a little sequentially, and then when they hit the back half, they were like, all right, we're gonna reuse this flying shot 12 times in a row and just kind of hope that everything else works out here.
I don't know if it's a sequential thing as much as a lot of the stuff in the third act probably had like stunts and effects in it, and that's the stuff they couldn't afford to finish. So inherently, all of the first like half or so of the movie was like, yeah, it's pretty safe to complete because it's all just, you know, people walking in sets and talking and whatever. But you know, the back third is where you've got all these like superpowered beings like flying and fighting and doing all sorts of things. So that's where you feel a lot of it really cut out. Also, Superman seems to know the villain's weakness, even though it's never established. There's never a moment where he like sees something that would tell him that, which is weird because it's such a simple thing to like have him see somehow. You know, there's so many scenarios you could think of, like, oh, how. Anyway, we'll get into all the details and stuff when we get into spoilers, but we're, you know.
Yeah, there's several times in the movie where I feel like the weakness should have kicked in front of Superman.
Yes,
but it didn't. It just was like, oh no, he's still fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, maybe that's the problem with having such an easy to understand weakness that we can constantly question if it should be kicking in or not.
Yeah.
Is that there's also like a subplot that's established early on, which I did kind of like in theory, at the very least, of like, you know, some asshole buying the Daily Planet, and like there being kind of this problem of like, oh, they want to just turn it into a slop, like, you know, newspaper to sell more copies and make money, and Perry White's all about the integrity. Rag. Yeah. There's something to that plot, which I think is, again, especially with the themes, because that's the thing, the movie does have themes. Like, there clearly was intention, because we're talking about, you know, nuclear weapons. We're talking about, should Superman interfere in people's, you know, in the world's like, politics. We're talking about the press and how important they are and how the truth's important. Like, all these things, I feel like there are ideas that we're trying to build around, and, you know.
Yeah, I see where the themes are. I see them as they are developing, but it feels like they were, again, that third act. When we hit that third act, it feels like, yeah, all of the themes were just like, okay, but how do we tie in the idea of journalistic integrity to fighting a bad guy down in Lower Manhattan? And the answer is, we don't, and we're not really going to come back to it again.
Excuse me, it's Metropolis. Although, I can forgive the mistake, because they, like every movie I've critiqued that they keep emphasizing the Statue of Liberty, this one is the biggest sinner of them all.
Look, I all the other ones I was willing to write off. I could say, like, you know, Metropolis is just very close to New York, and so we do that. But like this one takes the special effort to show the major New York landmarks besides the Statue of Liberty. Like, they show the Empire State Building, and I'm like, okay, so that's just New York then. Like, you can't say that you're close to New York if you're just in New York.
Yeah. Yeah, music, you know, is something we've talked about with each one. Obviously, they're still using the themes here, but it does sound a lot cheaper.
Yeah, I had a jump at the beginning of this movie because the opening credits, which are garbage, by the way, they are trash opening credits, but
yeah, they're even worse than 2, which I already critiqued for looking much cheaper than 1.
Yep, and I thought it couldn't be worse than 3 with the weird blurring effect on the bottom, but nope, they found it. But there is a moment, and I can't remember what name is coming up at the time, but there's a moment where it's one of the big bombastic, like, all the trumpets are blaring, and one of them squeaks like really bad, and they just decided, yeah, whatever, keep that in.
Honestly, it almost sounds like what like a cheap synth program would churn out if you put in the notes for the Superman theme. But it's from 1987, so I'm not sure how much synth was available. Like, I mean, obviously synths to a point existed, but I mean, like a synthetic orchestra that was actually mimicking those instruments. That's a different beast entirely.
But it's so strange because a synth wouldn't be making those squeaky mistakes. It would be playing it perfectly. If inauthentically, it would at least sound right. This sounds wrong in every way.
It just sounds a bit hollow to me. It doesn't have the weight to it. It doesn't. You don't feel. It's almost like they forgot to put in the tuba or something, where like the bassy brass is missing, so it just sounds a bit thin on top.
Yeah, during the opening title crawl, they specifically open with music by John Williams, and I just say bull, and then the next credit is like arranged and reset by whoever the hell this guy is, and I'm like, all right, that makes more sense.
Yeah, obviously, I looked up the director, Sidney J. Furie, and he has tons of credits. He was working all the way up to 20-somethings. And the funny thing is that I'd heard of like nothing on this list except for one thing in the 60s, which I've actually heard of, and I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but it's the Ipcris File or the Ipcris File. It's an old English movie which has actually got a very high rating. It's like one of these like thrillers that's actually held in high regard. But it's weird because it's that and then tons of other stuff that I've never heard of, and then Superman 4.
I'm wondering how many of these are probably also canon films. Like maybe he was just a guy on hand for canon.
That's a really good question. Yeah, he was still making stuff up to... He's actually credited for something in 2023, which seems wild to think about. I mean,
possible, yeah. He's still getting work.
But yeah, I mean, if I go down to like say this era, right? So this came out in 1987. If we go to Iron Eagle, which was the movie he did right before this, let's click on the poster. Oh, it's too small. I can't make out the.
It's not coming up on the Canon Group Films.
No, it looks like TriStar actually, but the poster. So I don't know.
All right.
I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? Maybe he just took this one because it was too good of a deal to pass up.
He walked away with most of the... I feel like Gene Hackman probably got paid the most, if I was to guess, but...
Yeah, probably. Oh, I didn't even check to see who got top billing in this one. Well, this is the one where it's actually questionable.
I didn't actually pay attention at the start. I did notice in the end credits, though, Christopher Reeve was first. He was the first on the list.
Okay. Yeah, he is on the movie's opening credits as well.
Cool. Cool. All right. Well, that's nice for him.
He finally got ahead of Gene Hackman. It only took 4 movies.
Yeah. Jim Broadbent's in like a small role in this movie, if you know who he is. But
I know who he is. I didn't see him. Well, I only saw him in the IMDb afterwards.
He's got his hair slicked back. He's like one of the arms dealers.
Oh, okay. Now I see him. Got it.
Yeah. I sort of caught because I've seen him in like a British sitcom from around this time period, so I kind of knew what he looked like at the time. That said, though, the hair slicked back did throw me a little bit. But yeah, so he's in there in a tiny role. But all right, I mean, I guess we kind of have like a new kind of love interest, although it's more of a Clark love interest than a Superman love interest, which raises some interesting potential.
This is exactly what we were talking about with what we wanted out of Lana's development if Lana were to stay, where we get someone who wants Clark and Lois wants Superman, and you get how these two come against each other. I actually didn't mind the entirety of the Lacey plot. I didn't think it was outstandingly good, but I think that for the development they put into it, it worked for the most part.
Yeah, again, it feels like it's maybe missing the conclusion. It's missing, like, obviously she does have a...
No. She died. I don't want to spoil what happens, but she died. She just died off camera.
Look, to be clear, she should be very dead. She should be. She isn't, but she should be very dead.
Yes.
But that's something to talk about. But yeah, no, I actually kind of agree. I actually think some of what they did with this is all right. And again, it's not quite there, but it's inching towards like an interesting idea. You know, and hey, obviously she's got a bit of an arc because she's the daughter of the rich asshole who bought the paper, and that kind of feeds into her character of being like kind of the rich socialite who kind of maybe learns to not be as evil because Clark's such a good influence, effectively.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think we should just give a spoiler warning because I don't know how much we want to dance around things in Superman 4 beyond this.
Yeah. That's fair. If people are looking for a recommendation on whether or not to check out, don't pay money for it, and don't do it when you actually want to watch a good movie. But if you're looking for something just to have fun with, it might be worth it.
I don't know. Like I own all these movies, right? I got the bundle on iTunes some time ago, and I gotta say, the HDR in this was actually quite good. So if you have the option of the HDR version at a decent price, I wouldn't say no to it if you've got the TV that can show it off, because it actually looked quite good.
All right, fair enough.
It's kind of weird that this looks as good as it does, and there's like other classics that have been given like shoddy treatment, but Superman 4 looks pristine. It's really weird, but there you have it.
I'm assuming it looks pristine outside of most of the compositing, because I don't think any amount of HDR could save that.
Oh yeah, we're not talking about composites. We're not talking about the quality of the effects, but we're talking about the image quality. That's different to the effects quality, which is very, very different.
Got it.
You know, Lexi's like flares, like this penthouse, it's got a lot of like marble and like shiny lights that are around, and they all just kind of pop. There was a lot of nice bits. Like they really polished a turd with this. It's really quite spectacular.
I wonder who shelled out the money for that. Did Warner Brothers come back?
Yeah.
Did Warner Brothers say, "Hey, we're gonna really make this one"?
What do you mean come back?
Blu-ray release?
They own it. It's theirs.
Yeah, but like, there's plenty of movies owned by a whole bunch of companies where they don't ever touch them again. Like, they just say, "Yeah, that one exists, and we're releasing it as is, so we don't have to sink in any extra money into it."
Hey, they want to make money from a new 4K box set. They have to put in the effort to make all of them 4K HDR. And
fair enough.
By God, they did. You can see all of this
enough.
movie in its beautiful glory. So it's fine.
All right. Fair enough.
So, yeah. Anyway, Superman 4, Quest for Peace, full spoilers from this point on. So, the opening of this movie, which again proves that they had themes in mind, it's not an accident that this movie starts with cosmonauts being saved by Superman, right? That is an intentional choice because we're talking about the Cold War, we're talking about nuclear arms race, and Russia, the Soviet Union, is very much seen as like the other side to the US or the West, and that's kind of like, you know, that's an intentional choice. However, Superman just opens the side of this space shuttle's door and just says, "Hello, goodbye, have a nice trip" in Russian, and then just shuts the door, and I'm like, they should all be dead.
As far as I could tell, it looked like there was an airlock that was separating out the two other ones from that one. And like, that would make sense because obviously he would need to be able to get in and out of the ship somehow. So there has to be an airlock somewhere. So I think that one actually works. The talking in space, that part doesn't. Yeah. That's broken.
He just says some words and it's perfectly audible. Yeah. So like, okay, fine. You give me an answer for one part of it, but you're not getting me out of the talking in space part.
Maybe they're really good at lip reading and they just know that he's saying Nosvadonya as he flies away.
Yes, the audio is just for audience interpretation. Like,
we hear inside of Superman's head what he intends.
Yes, of course. We could not doubt the credibility, of course, of any of this. Speaking of space physics, later on when they're on the moon and the American flag's there, I love the obvious, like the beam at the top to keep the flag like stretched out, as if it's on the moon with the low gravity, because obviously it doesn't move the flag.
Yeah.
But you can see
that's a thing. That's real. That's if they set on the moon and just let it do its thing, like it would eventually like furl down and stuff like that. They have a pole keeping it upright.
I assumed that the low gravity just kind of kept it in place. Okay, fair enough. I thought that was shoddy production design where they weren't hiding their trick to try and keep it from moving too much.
Yeah,
but fair enough.
That's actually how it's strung up there. It's specifically something that, of course, a bunch of people don't know about because we got all the conspiracy theories about, like, why is the flag, like, furling in that way, blah, blah, blah. But no, that's how it is.
You know what? Fair enough. I made some assumptions. And, look, clearly, this movie's better at science than I thought it was because I've already been disproven at least once. Yes, it is if you go in assuming it knows nothing about science, and then it decides to throw all of that legitimacy away in one sequence. Are you telling me that if we don't put your hair and throw it into the sun, a being won't be created with a full set of clothes? No, wait, we can't get to that yet.
All right, 2 sequences then.
Actually, okay, before we even get to the plot, I just want to say something here. Mm-hmm. We talked a lot in Superman 3 about how the fake kryptonite was effectively a red kryptonite story. It just wasn't actually red, right? Yes. And then they did something with a villain that could be seen as slightly Brainiac-esque, but it wasn't actually that Brainiac. I think it's really funny that then Superman 4 goes and does Bizarro, but just not quite Bizarro. It's basically it's Lex makes a clone, and it I don't know. It's just funny. It's interesting to me.
I have to assume, like, obviously at the current stage of writing we were at, it was always going to be this guy, but I have to assume that they did consider Bizarro at some point, but then ultimately pivoted because they were like, doing all of these fight scenes of you fighting yourself was proven to be expensive in Superman 3. We're not going to do that again. Not with our lowered budget here. So we're just going to have you fight some other dude.
Yeah. I mean, I think you could have had a different actor play the Bizarro. I think you can have the Bizarro version look a bit different. Like, it's just the idea that he's like an off version of Superman. I mean, maybe you could argue that it's too similar to him fighting himself in 3, and that's why they didn't do it. But it's not like this guy's like that miles different that it's still not just effectively Superman versus a evil version of himself. So I don't know. Anyway, so the opening of this movie like immediately did something to just confuse me and piss me off. Clark's back at the farmhouse, right? It's one of the first scenes we get. And he walks into the barn where the ship was, where he got the green crystal out of, right, that made the fortress. Yes. And he opens up the door, and we start hearing Lara, right? No Jor-El here. We hear Lara as if this was the voice talking in the ship as he was on his way here, and basically saying some basic things to him. But the thing she gets to is that the power source to this ship is very powerful. It's the last energy of Krypton, and he could use it once or whatever, but then it would be gone, so he should use it wisely, blah, blah, blah. And he picks it up, and it's a glowing green crystal. And I'm like, wait a minute. Is this supposed to be the same crystal from 1 and 2? Is there a second green crystal? Because that first one seemed pretty powerful. It built a whole fortress on its own.
Yeah.
Not to mention that green crystal in Superman 2 bailed him out when he lost all of his powers. It was like a jump start to make him Superman again. So it's kind of weird that we seem to be going down a path where this green crystal will be the magic fix for something later on when he needs help.
So narratively, I agree in that it feels cheap. It feels like, okay, this is just the magic MacGuffin, whatever. In terms of the storyline, I'm more willing to accept the idea that they were like, okay, step 1, we're going to give him a crystal to power the ship, and that's just for the ship to power him through that. But then on top of that, we're going to give him a second crystal, and that crystal is going to be used for the fortress and getting his all of this science and stuff built up.
I want to yell one thing.
Yeah.
Different color! Yes. A different color, you fools!
I was saying that back during Superman 1. Of like, out of everything we know about Superman, rule number 1 is if there's a glowing green rock next to him, he needs to be doubled over in pain. There's no reason to have a glowing green crystal be the thing that is actually super useful to him.
Look, I get what you're saying from like an aesthetic point of view, but at least I can argue with that they picked green because the whole idea that kryptonite is like, pieces of the planet that went bad, that are irradiated, that got all this stuff. So the idea that they're before it went bad, there was natural green crystals that were used, that were good. Like, his planet wasn't dangerous to Kryptonians when they were all there. So I think that was their way of saying, hey, there was green crystal on Krypton that wasn't a bad thing. Like, I can follow the logic to it, at the least. I'm just saying that for the purpose of this just feels like it's confusing, because is it the same thing from 1 and 2? Are they retconning that was already used up in 2? Except they're not, because later on they reference stuff that happened in 2, so clearly 2 did happen. So it's very inelegant, shall we say. Yeah,
no, I agree. And again, it is literally just a MacGuffin. It's not even like we hang on to this crystal, and it's like, oh, I have to explore what this means and really look into it. So, no, he remembers he has it in his pocket about an hour from now, and then everything's fixed.
Which, honestly, when we get to that stuff later, like, I don't think they need to have have it be like, oh, he needs something that'll fix him. Like, I think it could have just been like enough time passes, he gets better, would have been fine. But
oh yeah,
whatever. Like this is what they chose. So
no, I think the biggest thing they should have done for this one, and we'll get to it, is lean into the fact that he is powered by the sun. Like, they really harp on the sun for a lot of this, and yet for some reason it's not really brought up in relation to Superman's power source at all. It's brought up in relation to all these other things.
I feel like even though 2 kind of like alluded to the sun being part of why they have powers, it seems like in the movies, and maybe not even in the comics yet, I'm not sure when we officially got to the sun is what powers, Superman, and like that's like ironclad, that's the mythology. It may just not have been locked in yet, and that's why it's not a thing. Or at the very least, it wasn't locked in when they made the first movie, so the movies just aren't following any of the new stuff that's, came up. So it feels like that's just a knock-on effect from that. Even though it's actually kind of interesting thematically that both the villain and Superman are both sun-related in their powers. But then maybe it would beg too many questions, like, well, why doesn't Superman shut down when the sun's not hitting him? Like,
right, yeah.
And stupid shit like that.
Yeah.
So this just comes from stupidity more than anything else, I think. And possibly also the people actually writing the screenplay not understanding, assuming it was even a thing at the time, not understanding that that's where Superman's powers are coming from.
I just wonder what they think it means when they say you get your powers from this planet's yellow sun. Like, what? For me, that seems pretty obviously he literally is solar powered. It's coming from the sun. I'm curious what the other interpretation here is.
Did they ever say that line though? I'm not so sure they did.
They did in this one, because that's what they saying, like, oh, you get your powers from this planet's yellow sun, but if you use up this power, then you will be locked to it and it alone, blah blah blah, or whatever like that.
Oh, okay, yeah, okay. I know what you're talking about now. Well, yeah, that was basically, yeah, it kind of almost implied when they said that like he's got other sources potentially of power, but if he uses the crystal, he will be tied forever to the sun on this planet, which is its own kind of weird worms to unpack, to be honest. But
right.
Anyway, yeah, so Clark's selling the farm, but he doesn't want to sell it to like some corporation who's going to turn it into like something else. He wants to sell it to a farmer, and he's adamant about that. Also, he hits a baseball into the stratosphere, which I enjoyed that. I also enjoyed Clark pretending to be shit at baseball and like miss the ball, and like, oh, okay, but, Reeve still got it. He's still Superman. He's still Clark Kent. Like, he's still nailing it.
After seeing the movie, I can't help but feel like this sequence, because it doesn't play into anything else. We never come back and talk about this farm. I can't help but feel that this sequence is not just like a tiny little allegory for the owners of the Superman franchise, where it's like, hey, maybe we should have sold this off beforehand and like tried to do a thing. And they're like, no, we were waiting for the right thing. And then it never came along.
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's just Clark showing his values, and
right.
You know what he's like. So, and I guess it thematically at least ties in a little bit to the Daily Planet being bought by like a mega corporation and like a greedy rich man who's going to use it for his own gain and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So what's funny is that I remembered Lois been in this more, so I didn't think it was going to happen, but I was wondering if you thought they were going to write her away again, because she said she was going to France, and like when they introduce her, she's like trying to learn French. But it's actually set up for the punchline of like when they go into the Daily Planet and they're like, oh yeah, we've got a Daily Planet and all trips are cancelled, and she's like, what? And she says something in French. I'm like, oh, it was just all build up for this moment. Okay. They're not sending her away for the whole movie. That's fine.
Yeah. I mean, I had a moment. Where I thought they were going to send her away because she was like learning French and all that. But as soon as she was involved, and the very first thing we get from Superman is, outside of the cosmonaut thing, is a runaway subway train, which is caused because the driver just has a heart attack.
Yeah.
Which you would think there would be any sort of safety features to make sure that that does not happen, but whatever. Yeah, she's, as soon as she's involved in that, it felt like, oh, okay, no, she's a bit more tied into this one, where she's at least going to be in danger occasionally. So I immediately threw away the idea that she wasn't, or just was just going to be put on a plane, basically, for the rest of the movie.
Yeah. I think what was so weird about that is I wasn't even sure how Superman stopped it, because when we said what just happened, Superman flies to the front of the train and stops it, you know, so it doesn't keep running. It's like, okay, you assume in your head, like a classic comic book scene, that he puts his hands on the front of the train and, like, you know, uses his strength to slow it down until it stops, right? Simple enough, right? It's basically the grown-up version of Spider-Man trying to stop the train, but Superman's much stronger than Spider-Man, the little bitch that he is. So Superman's able to stop him, right?
I'm not arguing with you, but that was very intense.
I just felt like throwing some shit towards Marvel. I don't know why. I felt like it.
No, that's fine.
Just for fun.
You're fair.
Just for giggles. I like Spider-Man, for the record, everyone. Don't come at me. But
I especially love the Zeb Wells run. There, pissed him off again.
But no, instead, Superman kind of like stands in front of the train, and it's like the tracks, like the electricity on the tracks is like reacting to him or something, and it slows the train down.
He touches the third rail, which provides power to the trains, but apparently it's enough to just stop all momentum on the train as well on its own. I mean,
maybe what they're going for here is the idea of the built-in safety thing, where if like anyone touches that live rail, everything just automatically shuts down because someone's on the track. And obviously he's fine because he's Superman, and that's what he's doing. He's just like triggering that so that everything just kind of comes to a natural halt.
Right.
But I don't know if that's made clear, and it certainly felt like it would have been a more exciting scene to just have him, like, you know, have his hands on the front of the train and, you know, have it slow down.
This was the immediate part where I thought, oh, they ran out of money, or they were a lot more cost cutting, because every shot in this is shot in a very specific way where, is he in front of the train? Technically, as far as you could tell, but it doesn't feel like he was ever actually on set with the train. It feels like this was all shot very separately.
I mean, he does at least go up to the side window after the actual incident and says, hey, this guy's going to be okay. He's a doctor, though. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure he had a heart attack. I wouldn't define that as okay.
I was thinking the same thing. He's like, he's going to be okay, but like really get him to a hospital immediately.
So he flies off and, you know, yada yada. They go to Daily Planet and they find out that it's been bought by this company, and this guy's in here. He wants more sensational headlines. He's putting his own daughter in charge and like makes her Perry's boss, and Perry's like, I'm not standing for this. I'm going to go fix this. So Perry disappears after this pretty much until he shows back up at the end, having found the ways to like buy enough shares to keep this evil company from the power of the planet.
Yeah,
but whatever.
Look, nothing against Jackie Cooper as an actor, but he didn't have the fire in him in this one. In the previous movies, I felt him as Perry. He felt like he like had that strong grasp here. Maybe it was time, maybe it was just him not putting in the effort, but he didn't feel like he was healthily all there, I guess. And looking at his credits up real quick, he was only acting for another 3 years after this before he quit. So yeah,
maybe he was on his downward trend at the end where he's just was losing interest, or he was too tired or whatever. I don't know. Anyway, so it's okay. It sets this up, and immediately, like, Clark's very nice to Lacey, who's this daughter, the rich guy who's now in charge, and he's like, "Oh, don't worry, Lois, I'm going to talk to her." And he immediately says, "It's nice to meet you, and of course we will try and cooperate in every way we can." And I'm like, Clark, come on now. But then he adds on, however, as reporters, we think it's our duty to serve the people. And he sort of does he makes the argument, but he's the most polite about building up to it as he possibly can. And Lois is standing there, her mouth just, open, just in shock. Just like Clark's tactics here. She's ready to start throwing punches against this woman, and he's like being as nice as possible. And then very quickly it kind of turns into like her being like, "Wait, is he for real?" And Lois is like, "Yeah, he is, and I like him that way." And I'm like, "Oh, there's almost something you're touching here. This idea, because she even says, "Well, are you and him a thing?" And she's like, "Oh no, me and Clark are not a thing." And I'm like, "Oh, there's almost something interesting that you're starting to bark up here of like how Lois feels about Clark versus Superman, and like does she secretly get a little bit jealous?" That was the little tease at the end of 3 that we kind of liked, where she had that look in her face when Lana walked in and was like, "Oh yeah, Clark gave me a ring." Actually, where is Lana? I guess she's dead in the ditch somewhere. Who knows?
The first thing that happened as soon as the new guy came in, we was like, "Oh, redhead, get out of here."
No gingers allowed. Get out.
Nope. But no, I agree, because there's the sequence where she's talking to Lacey. She's basically saying like, "Oh, you got to understand this about Clark," and she lists off like this whole laundry list of positive qualities, and Lacey's like, and she's like, "And so he wouldn't be interested in someone like you." And it's like, okay, she's just listing all the things she likes about Clark at that point. So it does feel like we're kind of dancing there, just a little bit.
It's almost like if this movie was better and there was going to be a 5th one, you could sort of see them actually building up to her actually maybe naturally figuring it out, or maybe just falling for Clark, and then it becoming this thing where he has to tell her from the other side. And we'll get into the telling her and not telling her later. There's more to talk about there.
God.
So we've got all this going on. Meanwhile, Lex Luthor is still in prison. He's out doing the rock stuff.
Crushing rocks, whatever.
I don't know. It's what prisoners do in movies when they're out doing labor. I have no idea. And his nephew Lenny and his spectacular method of breaking him out of jail is to make the 2 guards that are guarding all the prisoners like his sound system in his car, and that like he is super 80s. He's got this ridiculous hair. He's putting on this sort of nasally voice. He's like, "Oh, far out," things like that. And then he gets them in the car and like, "Oh yeah, we'll listen to this sound system." He then, via remote control, has the car lock. The convertible roof comes up, and then he drives them off a cliff. And because it's like a cartoony kids movie, they show the 2 guards like crawling up, all kind of like dirty and like disheveled, but they're fine. Like they're not seriously hurt.
I really need to drive home for the audience here is that they show them approaching the cliff and they cut away, and you think, okay, we're not going to see that. And then they show the car off the cliff and it's like falling. And the instant before it hits the ground, we cut away to Lenny and Lex, and they're like reacting like, "Ooh, oh, that's bad." And then we cut back and it's just a smoky hole. We don't get to see the actual crash itself, despite the fact they obviously filmed it. And all I could think is, why? You can still show them crawling out of it. Why don't we get to see the car crash?
I think Canon had a lot of explosions and car stuff in a lot of their movies, and I can only assume that despite how cheap they were, because it was such a regular thing they did, they had like deals with junkyards, and like the one thing they had sort of like the system in place for was like, "Hey, do you need some cars to explode? Because we've got that all set up. You just like tell us how many you need, and we'll bring them down to set." Like they're there for you.
Probably.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, this is how he gets out, and they kind of disappear for a little bit. We just to sort of do his side of stuff before we get to the back half. It's basically just he's in this penthouse. He interestingly has 2 ladies. One's called Mixie, which definitely made my ears perk up a little bit, and then the other one was like Pixie, and I'm like, okay, never mind that. Is that relevant?
God, that would have been quite the turn if that was how they get Mixie into this.
But yeah, for the most part though, he's just like, I want to take care of Superman. And it's not really until Superman's other plots kind of like gearing up that we start cutting back to like his side of it and how he's going to manipulate this for his own gain. I did laugh though, because Superman 1 had those big trucks transporting the big missiles, and it's actually hard to believe that one franchise was able to show me that type of vehicle twice, because we see more of that in this movie, of the big missiles being transported in the flatbed of a truck. But here we are. So
I think it's also, it must be like directly surrounding this somehow, is that we get that there's a Superman museum.
Yes.
And the one thing that we focus on is that Superman donated a lock of his hair, like a single strand of his hair, which is holding up 1,000-pound weight. And Lex and Lenny break in because Lex is going to use the DNA to make his own anti-Superman. Yeah. And that's like his whole plan.
Okay, this may be a stupid question. Maybe there is something that is heavy enough, but given the size of this weight, is it even plausible that thing weighs 1,000 pounds?
I mean, how I would need a volume to compare it against here.
It may be entirely possible, but I did think to myself, like, what material at that size would be 1,000 pounds?
I think the heaviest element is osmium, which pure cubic inch is just shy of a pound. It's 80% of a pound. So 1,000 cubic inches would be 10 inches on either side, and that would be 800 pounds. So 1 foot by 1 foot by 1 foot should be about 1,000 pounds of osmium.
This is just a little bit bigger than that.
Technically possible.
So okay. Yeah. I was looking at it going, is this a silly number that they've put on there to say it's holding up this much weight? But
yeah, hey. I mean, it is a silly number. It's a crazy, like, round number. It's probably something closer to, like, 900 or whatever. But yeah, it's technically possible.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. So here's the thing. I talked myself out of this critique, in a sense, right? Okay. But it still kind of clashes with other Superman stories. Is that they're breaking into this museum after everyone else has left to get this hair, because they need a DNA sample, right? Mm-hmm. And Superman wasn't handing out semen samples earlier that day, so this was the best choice. So
that was Tuesday. Missed their shot.
Oh, they missed the shot, all right. So they break in, they get this hair, and I was thinking to myself, yeah, but how are you going to, like, detach it, because it's Superman's hair, and then Lex just get some bolt cutters that cuts it like it's nothing. And part of me thought, you know what, actually this makes sense that it's cuttable, because how would he get his hair cut when he was a kid, for example? How would he keep it trimmed now? Like, it's one thing to say he can pull out his own hair because he's strong enough, but technically to keep it in any type of, like, reasonable, like, presentation, it would need to be cuttable. So it actually makes sense that his hair, while being strong, is still cuttable with a blade. Yeah. Or a bolt cutter in this case.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think modern day comics says that the way that Superman shaves is using his heat vision. Like, he redirects it. Well, so you have...
That's fine for a clean shave, but, like, this is his head.
Right. But I'm just saying, like, apparently there is something, because obviously, you know, heat vision isn't able to just immediately penetrate through anything. It does have limits. So there has to be a limit to how much the tensile strength of his hair actually has. I agree it's nitpicky, but I think it makes sense within the context of the story. Otherwise, you're basically saying that Superman, anytime he takes a punch, is just fine. Like, there's no way to actually hurt him if he's that level of invulnerable. No,
this is the thing. Like, I actually talked myself into this in saying that this actually makes more sense that his hair's still pretty cuttable. I mean, maybe it needs bolt cutters instead of a regular pair of scissors, but just in the sense that when he was growing up, how was he getting haircuts if his hair... Like, I'm okay to accept that Superman's hair is still just hair, even if technically it's Superman's. Like, it still has to cut the same way or whatever. Maybe it's not as, like, quite the same, because then surely it'd get burned off a lot given some of the situations that he finds himself in. Maybe it has to be a bit more durable. But other than that, like, it could be pretty normal otherwise. The only reason why it even popped in my head is because so many other Superman comics or TV shows or whatever sell this idea that the hair is uncuttable. Because it's Superman's hair, and that's why it popped in my head. But this actually makes more sense if you think about it in a logical way, I think.
Yeah. I think it makes sense. I don't see any reason why bolt cutters wouldn't be able to get the job done.
Yes, so now we spent 3 minutes talking about a strand of Superman's hair. We can get into the more juicy stuff, which is that on the TV, there's basically, we see it a couple of times, but like once it's the, you know, president saying, we have to get our nuclear weapons ramped up because peace talks have failed, and then later on we see the Soviet rulers we have to get our Soviet nuclear weapons is what I'm trying to say up to snuff. We have to be the best. We have to be second to none. That's the phrase that's used multiple times, and it cuts to a school who's watching one of these announcements. And the teacher's trying to, like, have, like, a class talk with these, like, 11-year-olds or whatever age they are. And, like, hey, what should we do? Maybe we should write to our senators or something. And
Yeah, that's right, to a congressman. And as soon as that's said, I'm immediately like, fat lot, that'll do. And then one of the kids chimes up and says, fat lot, that'll do. I'm like, right, exactly. Thank you.
And the kid's like, oh, I tell you who we should write to. We should write to Superman. And this letter does make its way to Clark. We're basically doing some of the, the potential romance plot, which, by the way, the scene that this pops up in, Lacey has decided she wants to seduce Clark by this point, and decides that when he comes to see her in her office, she is going to have herself presented on the desk with her legs up so that it'll catch his eye. And I'm like, there is no way that if you were working somewhere and you walked in to your boss and she was sprayed out on the table like this, you could go straight to HR and you could probably get a settlement with the way that... Now, admittedly, not everyone might be upset about it, but if it did bother you, this is absolutely HR grounds.
Oh, absolutely. But Clark's not that kind of guy. He's like, oh, I could see what you're doing there. I am not interested, but she's golly gee, just want to have a good talk.
She's trying to coerce him as well. She's like, oh, I've got a new series of articles I want you to do about the nightlife of Metropolis. And he's like, oh, that's not really me. I'm in my bed by 10:30, blah, blah. And he keeps saying these things. He's like, oh, that's okay. I know all the places. I'll take you to them. I'm like, wait, so you've concocted a work project for him that involves him taking you to places that most people would go on dates. This is fishy. You're abusing your power, Lacey, and I'm not for it.
I'm taking this up with the highest publisher. Daddy!
Actually, that reminds me, there was a little line that I thought was funny right after they bought the paper, where they're looking over expenses, and the boss looks over at him and says, hey, Kent, why come you don't have any flyer miles on your expenses? And he comes up with a little excuse. I thought that was amusing. I was like, okay, that's a good joke.
Kind of thing. So one thing that this kind of began in the last movie, but it's still here now. Lois comes in with the letter from the kid and says, hey, Clark, we got a letter for Superman. And they kind of talk about they just need to run it or something like that in order to let Superman see it. But the way Lois presents it, he's like, no, Clark, you really should, you should read this. This is a bit bigger a deal than that. It seems like she's kind of accepted this idea that Clark is the go-between to Superman, like Lana did in the last one. And I don't know why. It doesn't feel like we ever established this, and they've just been running with it ever since.
Yeah, that is a little bit strange. Yeah, I mean... Yeah, I've got more thoughts on this later, actually, so I'm going to save them for then, because I think there's more interesting stuff to talk about with Lois. But, yeah, he reads the letter. Obviously, he's taken aback by it, and he goes kind of quiet. And immediately, when because the dad, right, he walks in and he hears some of this, he's like, oh, this is good stuff. We can put this up, and if Superman doesn't say something, then he's denying a child. And it cuts to the headline on the newspaper, which is Superman says drop dead to kid, and I'm like, there's a bit of a spin on that, I think.
It's got an in-between scene where the head of the papers brought the kid to Metropolis and puts him in front of a podium, and he's just like, now is there anything that you'd like to say to Superman? He's like, I just wish Superman had said yes. And then it comes up with a drop dead kid, and it's like, oh wow, damn, this is some forceful editorial here.
The clear indication is that Superman has simply not responded yet. He's obviously weighing it up. It's a big thing. He's been asked to intervene and get rid of all the nuclear weapons. Obviously he's taken some time to really consider it. We even get to see
him go up to the fortress. Yeah,
that's what I was going to say. And for some reason now we're treating it like it's the courtroom from the first movie where there's 4 talking heads at him. Because
they had the one style bit of Marlon Brando is how they were supposed to carry through all the fortress stuff, and one by one they've had to tick away things that they couldn't bring back. So now we're at, and I mean the whole fortress is now green on the inside as well, or at the very least it's when he puts in the crystal, it transitions to green. So sure, whatever, just do whatever you got to do.
Yeah. And what's so frustrating about this, though, this is kind of this feels more akin to what Jor-El was trying to get at in the first movie about not interfering. This idea that, okay, obviously you can try and show them the way and help them and so on, but you shouldn't intervene and drive their decisions as far as their own politics goes and things like that. Sort of Superman having to weigh that up. There is an interesting discussion to have here. And I do think, Superman's choice does make sense to me. I do, obviously I think there's a better way to show him weighing the options up and maybe coming to that decision. And I think his speech is okay. You know, he goes to the United Nations. I actually did like the little beat here where he asked if he can speak, and one of them at the top says, "Hey, you'll have to like have a sponsor to speak here." And like every single country like delegate puts up their hands. I thought that was a neat little Superman moment.
Yeah, no, I think it, again, this is the moments, these little parts here is where it is a good Superman story. It's this idea of he's just a guy with phenomenal power. He has this innate moral compass, but every once in a while there's something where that moral compass is challenged, and not in a way where it's like, oh, you know, a trolley problem or whatever, but just this idea of, I don't know what the right situation here is in terms of letting people do what they want and letting humanity be its own thing, and me coming in and fixing their problems. And that's been done to death in actual Superman comics, but it's always good when it's done well. It's something that can be examined and really thought about, of basically where's the line between a benevolent dictator and someone who just hasn't done enough work on their own, and where does Superman fall in that line?
Yeah, and I think this idea that, okay, he's not going to get in and stop like their politics, but he's going to like draw this line and say, you know what, I'm going to get rid of nuclear weapons. Like, you know what, you want to fight, then do it with sticks and stones, but you're not just going to like nuke every. And I do kind of like the context of him, kind of like, he doesn't say it, but there's almost kind of a like, oh, I don't want this world to die. It's almost like he's sort of like referencing Krypton and saying, I don't want this world to, because actually that's one of the things that the voices in the Fortress said to him, is like, let this world die. You could go off and just find another world. There's other civilizations out there. And I'm like, what? I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not Jor-El Lara saying it, so at least it's, you know, it's not one of the characters that are supposed to be saying good things to him, but it's like, that is like just the most horrific, awful advice like possible.
Well, I mean, I think that's still that there were shades of that back in Superman 1, where they were like, look, yeah, you grow up on this planet, but you're not going to be one of them. You're always going to be separate apart. But it was because he was raised by the Kents, and he did have this childhood where he truly belonged and became human, basically. Where I don't think any of the Kryptonians really understood that possibility. It was always going to be a thing where they expected him to be like, nah, you can bail whenever you want. These weird hairless apes are just hanging around, blowing each other up. You can bail whenever.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite things about Superman is the idea that Jor-El does have like a moral center, but he's got a bit of a god complex, and it's Jonathan Kent and Martha Kent who kind of like give him the human side, right? Actually make him feel empathy for people. It's not just about, you know, you're above them and doing the right thing because they need to be shown. It's no, you're one of us and you need to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And it's, you know, inherently I always end up looking at the Kents as the better influence, but it's not that Jor-El's influence is bad, it's just that it comes from a much more cold, like logical, like perspective than the Kents. And I like that, you know, like whenever those two sides are pit against each other and he has to kind of find something in the middle, like, you know, the right thing for him to do. So you know, like I don't dislike the plot that it's doing here. I don't dislike this idea that he's going to get rid of nuclear weapons. There's maybe some questions here about exactly how it's working. It seems to be that all the countries are offering them up because they seem to be firing them into the sky for him to grab them, as opposed to he's like breaking into their silos and just taking them out.
Yeah, so that's kind of my issue with this sequence is he gets up in front of the UN and he gives a speech and then he says, I'm taking away the nuclear warheads. There'll be no more nuclear missiles. And everyone is for that. There's no pushback. And this is where I think it maybe gets a bit too simplistic with the way that it does stuff. Obviously, we're building up towards we just want to have Nuclear Man. We just want to do that. So fine, whatever. But I think that having it be such a simple thing where everyone was on board with it kind of downplays the idea of how hard of a decision this was for him. This should have been something where there was some pushback. There was some people who were like, no, there are legitimate reasons for us to still have these and legitimate reasons as to why you're overstepping your bounds here. And have him try to wrestle with that. Have him try to like understand, because by the end of the movie, he does backpedal. He does go back and say like, okay, I was kind of wrong there, but it's not for any of the reasons that make any sense. It's just because the movie needs him to. So that's kind of where I hit this weird middle thing. And it's especially so where you're saying everyone starts firing up and just sending their missiles out into space. They don't do a good job of conveying that because they do a smash cut to Hunt for Red October. Just, all right, launch the missiles, fire. And my initial idea was, oh, they realize they're about to lose their entire missiles. They're launching them all off against enemies now. And Superman's going to have to scramble to go catch them.
Yeah, I agree. It's not very clear. And I also agree that the way of... I think this is actually pretty decent until... everyone just cheers when he says what he's going to do. And I could have maybe have been fine with everyone in that room being for it because it's the United Nations and not the leaders of the various countries. I would say planets, the various countries. Yeah. But it would have been interesting to see, like, what is the president? What is the, let's cut to the Kremlin. Yeah. What are they thinking right now when he's saying these things?
Show me the general of the army sitting there with a crumpled up piece of paper and just be like, God damn it, my entire plan for keeping this country safe is just thrown out the window.
There's definitely a lot more complexities. Like having to storm into like an American base to take a missile. Mm-hmm. And, like, they all kind of want to stop him, but they know there's no point in trying to fight him, so it's just kind of this awkward, like, maybe silence as he walks through, and no one's, like, sort of... Or maybe even they start fighting, not even, like, physically fighting, but, like, the idea that some yell, oh, you shouldn't be doing this, you've got no right, but then maybe some of the other people who work at the base are like, no, this is better for everyone, let him do it, and, like, have, like, that, debate play out as he's, like, basically ignoring all the noise and just doing it because he thinks it's the right thing to do. Yeah,
I kind of wanted a sequence where, like, he went up to the president. The president was basically like, look, I can't officially give the order that you are allowed to take all the missiles, but I can look the other way. And so we do get this sort of, like, implicit thing where it's a complicated issue. There's a reason that he took however long to stew on it, on whether or not it's the right thing to do. And I think wrapping it up as quickly as a round of applause is a disservice to the plot as a whole.
Yeah, I think maybe what they could have done to make it feel a bit more natural is, like, just have, like, one country agree, or even, like, what we're saying, like, maybe, like, America doesn't agree officially, but, like, everyone's kind of like, you know what, maybe it is better if he just does this. And maybe have it not be this idea that every country was on board and he'd already done most of it by the time Nuclear Man appears. Like, the idea that it was ongoing and then Nuclear Man interrupts, so a lot of it actually hadn't been done by the time we get to the end of the movie.
Right,
or something. Right. I don't know. But either way, this is what he's doing. And this is where, after like a montage of him throwing all these missiles into a giant net, who built this net for him for all these missiles in space? I do not know.
Fishing industry, whatever.
Yeah. He swings it up and he throws it at the sun, and there's some explosions and blah, blah, blah. And this is where we got back to Lex, and he's really getting gung-ho about his plan. And he starts comparing the sun to just one big atomic bomb. I don't think scientifically that's quite sound, but fair enough.
I mean, it's a fusion reactor. It's technically doing nuclear stuff on the inside, but I wouldn't say bomb.
Yeah, if he said it was nuclear, I think, okay, my very, very basic understanding of this stuff would, that would link up to me.
Let's be clear, though. Never once in this movie does he say the word nuclear.
No,
never
nuclear.
Once does that word from Gene Hackman's mouth.
Superman's from the planet Krypton, and this type of energy is nuclear.
Nuclear.
Anyway.
To the point where, like, this isn't Nuclear Man. I don't care what's written down. I'm always going to call him Nuclear Man.
Nuclear.
Nuclear.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes, it's an ER at the end as well, if you're writing that out, just to be clear.
Oh, that feels wrong. I don't like that, but all right.
That's how he says it. Nuclear.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I just don't like it.
So yeah, he's got some like arms dealers, and arms dealers are dealing in nukes. I feel like nukes aren't getting spread around quite as... This isn't like, oh, someone's got some like AK-47s that they're selling on the black market. Like, nukes are kind of a big deal. But like, hey, if you guys give me one of your missiles, I'll put this little box with my my hair strand and some dirt, I think he puts in that box. We see him put some stuff in the box at one point, these little science experiment.
Yeah. He says what it is. I just didn't catch it because it's like just so random. I'm just like, yeah, so I've added this other stuff in there as well. Whatever. Moving on.
Yeah, he just wants to be paid a shit ton of money for getting rid of Superman because he's ruining the war business for everyone. So
yeah, that's also kind of the other part of it is like, okay, fine, you get rid of all the nuclear missiles. You're not getting rid of the knowledge. Like, I get that the stockpiles are the things to be scared of, but like right now, because this is Cold War, right now there is an equal amount of nukes between both sides, and therefore they don't want to fight each other. However, if all the missiles are gone, and then Russia built one nuke, there's now 100% more nukes in Russia than there are the US. And like, is Superman just going to stay on top of that all 24/7? Like, it feels he didn't even know Zod was showing up until like however long after the fact. I don't trust him.
I presume when he'd be done with the missiles, he would go and like get rid of the manufacturing facilities, get rid of all them. That'll buy some time.
Fair enough.
I don't know.
I mean, this was released like, I don't know, 6 months to a year after Chernobyl happened. So I'm sure the idea of nuclear around the world was kind of way down low in public opinion.
Sure. They were probably shooting this whilst Chernobyl was happening.
Yeah, probably. They were like, hey, what's in the news? Nuclear? Cool. Do it.
Oh, free marketing. Excellent. Good news.
Because when everybody thinks of movies they want to go see after a year of hearing about the world's going to end in a nuclear hellfire, it's with more nuclear stuff.
Yeah. So it's like, okay, they fire the rocket into the sun. There's a whole bit here where Lex pretends to be a general, and it's really just for the comedy of seeing him like boss some like military guys around.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the missile fires off. We see this little crude box like stapled to the side of it, and it fires into space. Superman grabs it, throws it at the sun, and we see this red blob emerge from the sun, and we see the formation of Nuclear Man. Nuclear Man.
Nuclear Man.
So, what's the scientific reason for him coming with a full outfit?
That was that dirt he dropped in the box.
Right, okay.
It was special dirt.
He even has an N for nuclear on his chest. Like,
yeah.
what was going on?
Apparently, I don't think it came with the N, but the logo that was on Lex's hat when he was breaking into the Superman Museum apparently was the same like sunbeam logo. I didn't verify that, but that's what trivia says.
Yeah, so we get the dun 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 dun. That's his theme.
It's like, okay, the everything about the villain, I'm like, all right, he's blonde, opposite of Superman. I'm fine with that. He's just as muscular. You know, you got to have some parallels there. Fine with that. He's got a cape. Cool. The one design choice, two technically, but the one physical design choice that I did not understand was the nails. He's got long silver claw-like nails. It makes no sense to me. Like, what is that supposed to be saying as like an opposite of Superman? Or even like if we're talking nuclear, what is that supposed to be? It's just a weird power.
It doesn't make much sense. That's fair. He flies down to where Lex is, and I always forget before he starts speaking what they did with the voice. Which is
the second design choice I didn't get.
It's like a weird surprise. And I don't even recognize it as Gene Hackman's voice at first. It's not until he says, "Oh, that's my voice," and I went, "Wait, is it?" And I start listening for it. I'm like, "Oh yeah, I can kind of hear Gene Hackman in there now." But it just sounds like a weird, like not matching voice. Is all I can say.
Yeah. It feels like they recorded the lines with him. And then in post, they were like, he has too thick of like an Austrian accent or something. And we need to give him an American proper accent. So dub over. But then, yeah, it doesn't even sound like Gene Hackman because Gene Hackman's putting on such a deep growl with it that it sounds different than his more upbeat, cheery Lex voice.
But it's weird though. Like, did Lex shoot into a cup and put that in with the hair? Like, are we doing like the whole he's half Lex, half Superman thing?
Sure, why not? I mean, that was definitely not established because that was Superboy being in the 90s.
Yeah,
that's when that came about. So,
but why else would he have Lex's voice?
Why did he come down back to where Lex was in the first place? There was nothing drawing him to the penthouse. He's just like, yeah, no, he's showing up here. Don't worry about it.
Some stuff in the box. It was like a homing beacon. You have to come back and serve Lex. Although immediately he's like, I am powerful, you're an ant. But then they step back and he steps out of the sunlight and immediately just shuts down into like a little pose where he's like on his knees.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about that weakness for just a second here. He needs to be in direct sunlight.
Yes.
Or like at all times, or else he will shut down. So immediately, this guy is not a threat after sundown at all. Like there's nothing to say that he would be able to continue to fight. And also the direct sunlight thing, as we see in Lex's penthouse, is that like reflected sunlight that's bouncing off of like the floor or whatever is not enough. Yet for some reason, bouncing off of Lex's ring is enough. So it's literally just make up your own rules at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think there's I like the idea in theory because it's such a simple thing to understand and you can play with it and you can have Superman try and figure it out and then play around it once he realizes what the weakness is. But it's just not used in a consistent manner that makes any sense. Because I agree that he shouldn't shut down in this room. It's too open, there's too much light coming in from all the windows, and all they're saying is that all it takes is not to be in direct sunlight. What they should have done is have them back off into like a second room or something that didn't have direct sunlight coming in from windows, so it was actually just artificial light, and then he can shut down, and it's like, okay, if you completely block him away, because that's the thing, later on when Superman does block him in an elevator, in a box effectively, it's like, okay, that makes sense, because there's like no light at all getting in.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. But hey, it is what it is. Yeah. It's strange. And meanwhile, while this is all going on, before that even interacts back with Superman's side of things again, we've got all sorts of like shenanigans going on. We've got Clark at the gym with Lacey, because she's trying to like get him fit or something, and he's like pretending to be terrible at all the exercises.
I think this was for the article. I think this was for that article series he was talking about. Well, yeah, this is a new hip like workout place. That
makes sense. Like that tracks. But like, I mean, he's slightly amusing, I guess. But there's not really much here. The only important thing that really happens is that this is where she brings up that Lois has got Superman coming over for an interview. And no, we need to go back. I've skipped over the whole other Lois bit because that was before he made his choice. Because that one of the things he did before he makes his choice to get rid of the nukes. That's when the Lois scene. We have to. This is so important. This is so important. All right. So when he was weighing up whether or not he should, listen to this kid and take away all the nukes, him and Lois had a plan to go do. They were going to cover some banquet with some politicians or something. Whatever it was, and she shows up.
I think it was the meeting of all the delegates because he immediately makes up his mind immediately after that.
Oh, was it? Fair enough. But she comes to the door and she's kind of all dressed up. I felt like it was more like a fancy party or something they were going to, though, because she was like dressed for evening wear. But
maybe it was. I could be wrong.
She shows up and it's like, okay, we're seeing Clark's apartment. That's kind of interesting because we hadn't seen that in the other three movies. And she comes in and he's like, oh, I'm sorry, Lois. I completely blanked on it. And you can tell that this is not the fake in it is Clark. This is he genuinely forgot about this because he's, his mind's on this big decision that he's trying to make. And she's like, oh, is there anything I can do? Can I help? Like what's going on? And she's very helpful and whatnot. And he says, let's go out for some fresh air. And he walks her out onto the balcony. And I will admit, before we get to anything else in this scene, I will admit, Lois saying out loud, Clark, it's not that bad, as he like steps off the ledge holding her hand is legitimately quite funny.
Oh yeah. No, I see the humor in the scene. It's a nice moment. I think the compositing kind of ruins it for a second afterwards, but it's a funny enough idea.
No, like I'm not talking about the composite, I'm not talking about the flying afterwards. I am just talking about that moment where he just takes her hand and just walks off the ledge and she just yelps out, Clark, it's not that bad.
I think the double whammy for me is like you could easily see the sequence where he's like, all right, I'm going to reveal myself. And he steps off, seems to plummet, and then comes back up as Superman. But nah, he takes her with him. And that's what I think adds that extra layer of like, if I'm going, so are you, Lois.
Yeah, he catches her. He switched out as Superman, but he's still wearing the glasses. And she takes the glasses off and she's flooded. And she takes this very in her stride, which I guess technically they kind of explain when they get back, because it's clear that she remembers everything from Superman 2 when they get back. Yeah. But we get a whole flying sequence where they fly all the way to San Francisco and back again, and we get the love theme playing, all the rest of it. They're doing the whole thing. And they get back, and somehow his name comes up, and he's like, oh, you don't know my real name? And she's like, Kal-El. And he's like, wait, you remember? And she's like, yeah, I remember everything. And it's kind of, it's just a little sweet in and of itself. And I do think the flying scene was a bit gratuitous and unnecessary. It's a bit overlong, but I didn't really have a problem. Like, I actually genuinely like the idea of Superman struggling with this very real decision and coming to realize that he needs to talk to someone. He needs to confide in someone, and picking Lois makes sense. And this idea that as soon as like the secret's revealed again, the entire mind wiping, whatever it was, completely just gets lifted, and she knows who he is. And it's like, hey, it was stupid you ever wiped her mind. This is what you can have. You can have someone to confide in. And then immediately, he gives her another magic kiss, and she forgets again. And I am like, what is this bullshit? First of all, this seems cruel from his perspective that he is doing this to this poor woman. And secondly, as an audience member, it's just so frustrating.
So there's like three things wrong with this scene for me. One, I appreciate the idea that he has someone to confide in, that he finally tells Lois, like, hey, this is me, this whatever. Obviously, it would complicate the love triangle they're going for later on. You'd have to rewrite the whole Lacey stuff, but I like the idea. However, the implication is that he did this with the explicit intention of, hey, Lois, what do I do about this nuke thing? And he never does. He doesn't say a thing. He just tells her, says, hey, I'm Superman, and then kisses her again. And then the extra part of this that really gets to me is that he does it so casually and so without issue that it feels to me that he does this like every 2 weeks.
Yeah, it makes you wonder how often is he pulling this ripcord and then just putting her back in the box. Yeah, it feels seedy. It feels like something that's not nice, and it feels like, regardless of how she actually feels about him and how we know there's nothing malicious in his heart because he is who he is, having this secret constantly be put back in place over and over again feels shitty and unfair to her.
Yeah.
Because she can't progress, she can't grow, she can't, remember the experiences and have it evolve who she is, and then, make new decisions based on it or anything. He literally
says, as he's going to kiss her, he's like, oh, I can't connect to any one person above the rest of them. It's not fair. And then he kisses her. I'm like, not fair to who, dude? You're the one who keeps on yo-yoing with her mind and heart at this point. It's weird.
Dear. It's such a thing where it goes through the gauntlet in this sequence. From when she shows up at the apartment, where I like her being... Because, they've only just first met in this first Superman movie, and time moves so quickly that I like that this at least establishes, no, in the time that since he's become Superman and he's living in Metropolis, they have become close friends. She comes over and sees him at his place. There is a camaraderie there, a friendship that is even inching towards a romance. The idea that he wants to confide in her, even if he doesn't want her direct advice, but he just needs to unload, and she's the person that he wants to give, be there for him. I like that idea. And then, no, we want to just recreate the flying scene with Superman and Lois. We want to have him immediately wipe her mind, and all these decisions in the back half of this sequence just upset me. And it's like
There's a bit in the show Robot Chicken. I don't know if you're familiar, where they literally they reenact the kissing scene from Superman 2, and it's all done like action figures. That's the shtick of the show. And they do the kissing scene from Superman 2. And I've seen this bit before I've seen this movie, and the bit is him being like, wow, why haven't I used this in any other places? And so it shows him on a montage going around to his various different villains and using the mind wipe kiss on all of them. And like, that's the joke. That's the thing. But it's a joke that he keeps on using it. It always felt like it should have been every other Superman power in these movies, where it's a one and done, where he just does it and then like we don't ever talk about it again.
I would argue the better option is a none and done, but
yes, correct. But like, if we're going to do it, then don't do it again. So it's crazy to me that Christopher Reeve looked back at Superman 2 and said, that's what we need back. The mind whammy kiss. That's perfect.
So yeah, that was a thing. We had to go back to talk about that. Yep. We couldn't not talk about that because it was so upsetting. Right. But yeah, so this double day potential where Lois is interviewing Superman with Lacey's help to throw a little dinner party for him, and Lacey's now invited Clark. And so Clark does the whole thing where he keeps making excuses to go back downstairs to the taxi driver or whoever, and then he swoops in as Superman at the window, so we're constantly, he's never in there at the same time as both people, obviously. And it's frustrating both ladies. Well, it's frustrating Lacey, and not in a way she gets angry, she's just sort of like going, oh, Clark, why did you keep getting, like distracted or pulled away or whatever. Which actually leads me to one of the little super-powered moments that really bugged me in this. There's a few of them, of course, we've brought up a couple of them already. But one that bugged me here is that Lois is making duck, and she says that she's making duck and a bunch of other things. And Superman, to try and keep this thing going where he's like, she'll be distracted in a minute so he can run off and be Clark again, he uses his X-ray vision and looks at the duck in the oven, which is nowhere near done. And he seemingly uses his heat vision to heat it up really quickly so that it is done and it'll start to smell like it's burning and Lois will have to go and do it. However, he does this through a closed door, which makes me wonder why there's not a big flaming hole in the door.
Technically, X-rays can also heat stuff up. It is still providing energy.
Oh, okay.
However, I think it would still cause issue to the door if you reach that level. So, yeah, I got nothing. It's Superman. That's the answer.
Yeah, well, I've never got the impression though that his X-ray vision, he's firing out X-rays, is he? It's more like he's like he can see the spectrum of X-rays. No.
I mean, yes and no. Again, if you look at it from a literal perspective, one thing that has always been constant in Superman is that he can emit energy from his eyes. That is what the heat vision is. If you take that to its next logical point, he also has like supervision as well, where he's able to see stuff a lot closer and clearer and whatever. If you take that to its logical conclusion, it makes sense that the X-rays are being emitted from his eyes, and that's what he's perceiving back, because the X-rays have to bounce off of something to be seen. Does it make more sense that he's just able to see in the X-ray spectrum? Yes, but then that is a new power set. So it's a little iffy on where it is on that level. But well, I agree.
I always thought that's what it was. So to me, that wasn't a new power set. That's just always what I thought his X-ray vision was.
Right. I mean, for me, and this is obviously pulling from a very specific point in the comics, but Superman has the solar flare ability as well. And that's kind of the extension of expelling energy from his body in a massive way. So,
I mean, that's just his heat vision dialed up, though. It's just more solar power.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess you could say that the X-ray vision would be this idea that, he has super hearing, so therefore he's able to see different wavelengths of light as well. Yeah. I just don't think that there is enough X-rays being sent out from the sun for it to really be enough to get like a full vision,
I mean, that's a fair argument that I really cannot fight at all because I don't know enough about it to possibly make the argument. But I've always seen the heat vision as him just expelling excess solar energy, right? And arguably that's why it doesn't kick in until he's a teenager, because up until that point he wasn't soaking in enough of it to have to expel it. Kind of like how there's other things that your body can't produce until you're at least in your like early teens.
Welcome to Superman 4, aka the Jizz episode.
Look, I wasn't trying to get smutty, but like I think it helped my point that I was trying to make. Okay.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's the one thing that I will give Smallville credit for, is linking the heat vision to the changes a body goes through puberty with. I think that was a clever change they did on their side.
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't like that show, but yeah, specifically tying the idea that him getting kind of turned on triggers the heat vision at first until you can learn to control it is actually kind of... Because it's like when you're an awkward teenager and you get like the random erection that you have to try and hide, and you're like, oh no, quick, cover it with jackets and stuff.
Except his can burn down the barn. So.
Exactly, it's more dangerous. Yeah. Because you know what? Every guy listening to this, we were all there in school, the bell rang, you had to go to your next class, and you're like, shit, I have a boner at the worst possible time. I can't move yet. It has to go away. Or I'm going to be stabbing people with it.
Oh, God. I love the idea that that's like this is what the Superman 4 episode is. Like, that's just where we're at now.
We were all there, okay? It happened to all of us.
Yeah. I will stand in solidarity with my fellow man. I just questioned doing it during this movie review, but whatever.
Okay, anyway, okay, right, so yes, double date things. Lois is asking her a question. She only gets a couple out, though, before Superman flies off again.
I look, the sequence is only 5 minutes, but I was bored by it by like the 2-minute mark, and then it just kept going. Like, I got the shtick of it, but it just felt like it was going on for a bit too long, and it reminded me a bit of like some of the comedy that didn't work from 3, where it just felt like it was going on a bit too long.
Yeah, I mean, I was having a reasonable amount of time with it. I think maybe the bigger problem for me here isn't really the sequence itself, because I can see the fun in doing such a sequence. The two things that stuck out to me is, one, it felt like Clark had an out at one point where Lacey said, let's not go back up, let's just go and do something ourselves. And he's like, no, we shouldn't, they're expecting us. And I'm like, Clark, why wouldn't you take this out? This is stupid. It's like you want to keep playing this game. Right? But the other problem that I think is more an important problem is that it did occur to me that we're, almost 2/3 through the movie at this point. And yeah, like, don't get me wrong, Lex is going to use his frequency again to talk to Superman by the end of this scene and get him involved in what he's doing. But once again, we've went almost 2/3 of the movie where Superman, the main character, is unaware of like anything the villain's plot is doing, and it's not even becoming a factor in his life until the last act of the movie. And I do think that that's like a structural problem, if nothing else.
Yeah, I think I'd be fine with it if it felt like we were just going to go directly into that third act fight. Like, yeah, it would still feel poorly structured, but it'd be okay. But it feels like everything before this point in the movie is kind of just stopped. Nothing like really matters in how is the Clark and Lacey thing going to happen out? What about this stuff about him destroying the nukes? How does that result in like the better planet or whatever? All of it's kind of thrown away for, we got big blonde buff guy who you got to fight now, and that's the end of the movie.
Yeah, pretty much. I just to compliment Reeves again on his performance is there's a moment at the start of this double date thing where when he comes in as Clark and Lois, sort of acting as a friend to him, comes over and says, hey, she put a lot of effort into picking out that dress, so make sure you say something nice. And he just sort of goes, oh, nice dress, immediately. And Lois just sort of rolls her eyes and goes, come on, Clark, better than that. And I love that when he flies in as Superman a minute later, he looks over at Lacey and goes, that's a very attractive dress you're wearing, very confident, and it's like much better than what Clark said. And I thought, I don't know what you're playing at, but that's funny to me that you still intentionally screwed up like the flirting part as Clark.
Yeah.
I don't know. I get that.
All I could figure is that he's trying to push these people away romantically. Like, he's trying to make it so it doesn't work. So he's purposely, as Superman, flirting with Lacey more, and then as Clark being as oblivious as possible and still trying to be like closer to Lois.
Yeah. But Lacey's found she likes the nice boy. She's found out for the first time in her life that the nice boy is the one she wants, and this is not going to work.
I mean, if we're just going to wrap up Lacey's plot entirely real quick, we later on in this, Superman, as he fights Nuclear Man, gets injured. We'll get to exactly what it is, but people are questioning whether or not Superman's even alive. She is told by her dad, hey, run these trashy titles and headlines and whatever, and she says, no, screw that, and then she storms out and says, no, Lois, I'm actually a good person now. And that's basically all of her plot.
Yeah, outside of her being used as a prop in the fight.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Yeah, I feel like there was stuff that was maybe trimmed out there in one way or another that maybe they had more plans for.
Yeah, I mean, I'll straight up say I didn't watch the entire sequence, but there is a 10-minute video on YouTube of a cut subsequence where apparently Lex and Lenny made a prototype Nuclear Man.
Oh, I actually think this is an extra on the the Blu-rays and stuff. Like it's on the iTunes version as well. I never watched it this time, but I think I vaguely remember when I first got the Blu-rays watching this it's like they tried it a first time, and maybe that's why it feels like they disappear from the movie, because they steal the hair, and it's not until they're kind of ready to do the Nuclear Man plot where they come back into it, and it does kind of feel like, oh, maybe that's where like, okay, their subplot there was going to be them trying and failing and realizing they needed more energy, so they'll need to fire it into the sun or something, you know?
Right. And then, again, that's a whole 10 minutes that was cut out of the movie. There's a reason this got down to 90 minutes, and it's not, I don't think, because that's how long the script was. I think this probably was a 2-hour-long script like all the other movies, but they trimmed it down to 90 minutes in order to kind of cheapen up maybe some post-production stuff, maybe get more showings in theaters.
I would say that all the stuff that seems to be missing from the third act, and the reason why it's not in deleted scenes, is because they either just chose not to shoot it because it was going to be expensive, because it was all stuff that required more effects and stuff like that, or stunts. And this other 10 minutes was the stuff that they felt could be trimmed without sacrificing anything important, because maybe it just was a dumb joke. Effectively, here's the shit version of Nuclear Man that we didn't quite do.
Yeah. That's the thing. Like, he's essentially Chunk from the Goonies. Like, he is an idiot, and he's just kind of meandering about and just being uncomfortable the whole time.
How did they get rid of him then? Did they kill him?
I didn't watch the end of the sequence.
Okay,
I don't know.
Fair enough. Just like Lex pulling out a revolver and being like, all right, that was a failed attempt.
Honestly, that would get such a kick out of me if he's just like, well, on to version 2.
Yeah, so Lex uses his frequency again. He talked to Superman, and he's like, hey, I'm up to something. I've got bombs in a building. You know, where could it be, Superman? And he also takes over the screen in Times Square, which seems to be like right out the window of this apartment building.
Yeah, I have to assume that it's not actually taking over. Like, it has to be some subliminal frequency or something that only Superman can see, because it's one thing to be on a frequency no one can hear, but if you're just mouthing the words on a screen, I feel like people are going to notice, Lex.
I think he implied that no one else could see him, so it's just, I don't know, like some other visual wavelength that no one else can perceive. Right. So he immediately flies to Lex, and he's like, what are you up to, Lex? How did you get out of prison? Blah, blah, blah. And Lex is like, no, I always like you dropping in Superman. And, you know, Gene Hackman's entertaining to watch as he does his rambling, because he's very charismatic. He's like, what are you up to? And of course it's all building up to when he opens the drapes or whatever, and Nuclear Man like walks in, like, because he talks to Superman for a long time before Nuclear Man walks in, and Superman looks over at him like, oh no. He clearly looks like an evil version of me. This might go bad. He's been up to some bad things.
I like how Nuclear Man, as soon as he's revealed, is like, kill Superman. And Lex is like, hold on, I'm still monologuing. Give me a second.
So of course at the end of the scene, like, you know, they grab each other and go off the ledge and fall and fly and whatever. And it's... Do you know what the funny thing is about all this fighting that happens here? Is that there's a couple of interesting bits to it where I'm like, I could see the ideas for the big spectacle. Like, as much as... This is what I was getting at earlier when I said that I hate how they keep emphasizing the Statue of Liberty. But there is something about the visual of, like, the villain picking up the Statue of Liberty and flying it into the middle of the city to, like, just throw it into the street. And like just you know, the insane visual of like him holding like a part of it, and they've got like a big prop for him to hold, which I assume as soon as you go an inch off camera, there's nothing there. It's just this one like section that he's holding. That's made of polystyrene or whatever it is, so it's light enough. And it's just this incredible visual of like him flying with this, and I'm like, there's some ideas here. There's also some other stuff though that I hate. For example. They fly up at one point into space and they fly back down and they end up in China, right? And we're at the Great Wall of China, and Nuclear Man decides to just start blowing chunks out of the wall and people start falling to their death. And Superman, of course, comes down, swoops in, saves the day. And this is where we get magic rebuilding eye power.
Okay. According to trivia, and I don't know where they're getting it, but according to trivia, the idea was to film him using his super speed to repair the wall. And then that was too expensive. And they thought, we can just run the film backwards of us taking apart the wall, and that'll work just as well. So that's what they did.
I mean, it's comforting that it at least came from that and not just someone thought this is a power Superman has.
Right. I don't think anyone ever thought this is a power Superman has. I think someone had to run up the ladder saying, hey, do you think people will get too pissed if we say that this is a power Superman has? And someone said, nah, just do it.
The other big thing that happens around here is Nuclear Man is trying to, cause more damage and give, disasters for Superman to deal with, is he flies into a volcano in Italy.
Yep.
And he makes the volcano erupt, which we get some spewing, red mist that's meant to be lava. To be fair, there was a couple of close-ups in the little street they had where lava was going down the street, and it did look kind of similar to the volcano movies of the 90s. I was like, okay, that one particular effect looks alright, actually. Whatever they've done there.
Yeah.
The stuff that was coming out the actual volcano miniature or whatever it was looked too much like liquid. But the magma going down the streets was okay. It was decent enough.
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Superman's solution to the volcano. He visions off the top of a mountain, turns it upside down, turns it upside down, right? Yep. And drops it into the volcano like a cork.
Yep.
And then uses his super breath to cool down all the lava that's already on the streets, and everyone
as it's in the middle of town. Doesn't scrape it up, doesn't move it out of the way. Nobody can access their homes anymore, but lava stopped, whatever.
Like, Nuclear Man's on the loose. We have to go deal with him. He can't be lingering around too long here.
Oh, absolutely. Compared to the Great Wall of China, which was just before that sequence, I'm fine with this. I'm fine with the volcano. Like,
it's mostly...
Sure. Is it silly, stupid superhero comics-esque sort of stuff of chopping off the top of a mountain to go plug another mountain? Yeah, absolutely. But it's fine. It's not hurting anyone. I'm okay with it.
Oh yeah, it doesn't upset me like the wall being rebuilt does. This is just a little silly, but it's like at least there's simple. Actually,
what you got?
I think it's at the end of the movie when he goes back to see Lex. But there's a moment in this movie where Lex says, "How did you figure out his weakness?" And Superman says, "Simple high school maths." I'm like, do not say that. Do not say there's any high school mathematics in this movie. How dare you?
Yep. No, I this was the part of the movie that I was like, oh, okay, we're doing a globe-trotting thing because we have them in Manhattan, quote unquote, metropolis. We have them in China, we have them in Italy, and we have them out in outer space. And these are all places where parts of the fight take place.
Yeah, and it ends in Metropolis because it's after the Statue of Liberty bit where he gets scratched on the neck, I think. That's where this ends.
I do want to point out in the Metropolis bit, they specifically show a skyline that still has the Twin Towers in it, and they show him carrying the Statue of Liberty, like, angled directly in that direction. And all I could think is, oh no, please God, don't tell me he's heading towards the towers. But no, the bit that I thought we were going to get here is that we had the bit of saying that he needs direct sunlight. We have gone seemingly once fully around the world. Why did he not lose his powers at some point where the sun was not visible to him?
Because he never went to the dark side of the Earth. He always flew back round the sunlight side.
That seems wildly circuitous and not making any sense, but sure, that must have happened. Because I thought this was going to be where we get the initial reveal for Superman. It doesn't even need to fully power down, but just like kind of gets weakened, and Superman notices and says, oh, okay, that's how I can end up beating him. Like he realizes it.
The logic dictates that during this first fight, as much as Superman loses and gets badly injured at the end, he should see something that hints him or clues him in to what the weakness is, so that he can utilize that in round 2. But that does not happen.
No. So yeah, in the middle of, or as the Statue of Liberty bit's wrapping up, he gets clawed by Nuclear Man in the back of the neck, which doesn't immediately kill him or stop him or anything like that. But Nuclear, gets away, and he starts getting more and more ill.
Yes, he gets kind of... Well, because at first he's just missing, and this is when we cut back to the paper, and they're like, where's Superman?
Dead.
Is he dead?
Best visual in the whole movie is during the fight scene, he gets the cape. Superman gets his cape torn off, and it's just fluttering in the breeze, landing on the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, that's how they show that there's something really wrong at the end of the scene, is that he sort of like flies off looking ill, and then you see the cape flutter down. And it ends up being at the Daily Planet because the rich guy has bought it. He made sure he got it because it's good for publicity. And Lois gets mad and like takes it and says, "You don't deserve this," and like storms out with it, kind of thing. And she goes to Clark's place and she's like knocking on it because she's worried that Clark's not showing up. They're also concerned about Clark, and which I also like. I like that she cares about Clark. So she goes to see if Clark's all right, and she basically breaks in because he won't answer the door, so she takes out her card and like jimmies her way in, which I like. I think it makes sense that Lois would know how to do this because she's that type of reporter. And she comes in and Clark's like, quickly gets his glasses put on, but it does this thing where he was just sitting there sick, and I kind of like that reveal that it's not like there's some big dramatic location that he's staying. He is literally just on the couch sick at home and doesn't understand what was in those nails that made him sick or whatever. And I'm like, okay, I was going to say I'm giving this movie too much credit, but I'm not, because I'm not saying they're doing this.
Okay.
Because they're not. But there was a moment in this scene where a better version of this movie, it did occur to me, would be doing a thing where clearly Lois knows that he's Superman, but is not going to actually tell him that she knows. And she's basically giving him the right advice that he needs to hear, even though she's not openly saying, "I know you're Superman." Like, she's saying, things like, "Oh, you'll get back on your feet. Hey, like, tell Superman he'll need his cape." Because I even thought at the end when she put the cape down and said, "Oh, if you see Superman, give him his cape," I was like, this feels like she knows, and it would almost forgive the kiss thing earlier if it's like, it didn't really work. Like, she kind of like went along with it, but she's been kind of like letting it play out. And it would maybe even like add a lot of humor to the whole double date thing if she secretly knew the whole time that this was him just trying to like dart around, and like maybe she was even edging him on and prodding him into like making mistakes or something. Like, there could have been something to play with there. But at its core, I like the idea that she had figured it out because she's Lois freaking Lane. She's that smart. She's not an idiot. But obviously the movie's not doing that. She doesn't know.
Well, no, she doesn't know. However, when she walks into the apartment, I think Clark makes the point of like, "Hey, Lois, how did you know I'd be here?" And she makes the line, she says something of like, "Oh, I don't know. It's kind of like with Superman. Like, I'm always just drawn to where Superman is. I guess it's the same for you." And she doesn't put two and two together. But the filmmakers are trying to hint at that. It's almost like, again, if there was a Superman 5, that's the plot we're doing.
Yeah, it's so frustrating because like they're just like they're so close to what I want. They're like they're scratching at it a little bit, and they're checking it out, and they're not actually doing it. It's almost a sweet scene. And what's so weird is the next time we see Clark, he looks old. It's like they put old age makeup on him as he's like crawling to the green crystal in the barn, and it's like, oh, this is the last of Krypton's energy. And the movie basically sells us the idea that this will cure him, but this is a one-time thing. If he gets scratched again, he's done for. Which I just think's a bit silly. Like, what's Nuclear Man scratching him with that's doing this to him? But fine, whatever. That's what you're telling me. The bigger problem I have though, coming out of this, is like, okay, you're doing the whole thing where he's knocked down, Superman no more, whatever you want to call it, and he might not be able to come back. And one of the charms, one of the fun things about doing this with a superhero is you get to have the moment where they swoop in, they make their big comeback, and it feels like all hope was lost, but here he is. And so Nuclear Man sees a photograph of Lacey in the paper, because apparently it's a front page news to say, hey, here's the new person in charge of the planet. And
I mean, if it's your paper, yeah, why not do it?
Yeah, it's very egotistical, but he sees Lacey and decides he wants him some of that. So he flies down to the street in front of the Daily Planet building, presumably, and he's kind of just like storming past like police and taxis and stuff, and they've got like a backlot here with a bunch of extras and stuff. A little money was spent in this sequence, to be fair. And
this is where they realized we're running out of money. Yeah. They had to pay all the extras for one day, and they're like, oh god, no.
But Superman's just standing at the door of the building, and it's like a nothing. It's not like a big entrance. It's not it's nothing. And I was like, why would you waste like this moment? Like, why would you just throw him here like this?
To me, it honestly feels like in the production schedule, they had a note that says film part where he lands in front of Daily Planet, big triumphant score, and then they hit that point and they're like, we can't film that. We have no money left. So cut to whatever shot we have where he's already there.
I guess, I mean, I don't know, but like he's like, I need the woman. And then Superman's like, well, you can't have her. I'll never let you see her. And it's like, wait, do you know who he's talking about? Because you shouldn't. Like, why would you know who he's talking about? But it seems like he does.
Oh, no, it seems like he absolutely has an idea. I guess you could excuse it as, no matter who it is, we're not going to let him get to her.
Yeah.
Like, it could be freaking Diane in HR. It's not going to matter.
Yeah, that's true. I it's so weird as well that Lacey never, like, is aware that this guy's after her or that she's in any danger. Because the scene a little bit later, when Nuclear Man comes back, and he does come and kidnap her, like, he does that. Like, he just sort of, like, barges into the planet and grabs her right after she's, like, said piss off to her dad or whatever it is. And it's just, like, she had no idea that she was ever in danger. Like, Superman had somehow, like, kept them away from even, like, the notion of the threat, that she was oblivious to the fact that he even existed. So it's like this out of nowhere thing. But before we get to that, though, they fly up through the various floors. So there's these shots of Nuclear Man going up various floors as he goes up the building. And basically, he tricks Nuclear Man so that he can trap him in the elevator, and that means he's got no sun, so therefore he powers down, and Superman just flies him to the moon and sets down the elevator. And I thought this was a bit, I thought he was going to bury him or something, that would make some sense, but instead he doesn't. And so when the sun, like, comes, because I thought you can't just leave him here, Superman, and I thought, oh, maybe he's going to go back, he's just going to, like, check on the American flag that they knocked over in the way, he's going to fix that up. That's the whole bit. But instead, when the sun starts coming through the crack in the elevator doors, the sun, like, rises on the moon, Nuclear Man just kind of gets back up, and they fight just one of the cheapest looking fights you'll ever see on a moon set, where they're throwing polystyrene rocks at each other, and they're sort of, like, pretending it's low gravity, so there's kind of, like, this slow motion look.
There's a bounciness.
It's like it just all feels a bit weird and fake. And it all culminates in Nuclear Man punching Superman on the shoulder repeatedly to like drill him into the ground. Like, he sort of hammers him in until Superman's completely submerged into the moon surface.
Honestly, it's a dumb fight scene. It does look cheap, but, like, it kind of is what I expected the whole time. Like, at this point in the movie, like,
sure,
especially, we look back at the other Superman movies, it's not like any of them are well known for their great choreography.
Oh, no.
All the fight scenes are very slow, very paced in a very deliberate way, where you get a feel that every punch is drawn out to draw attention to it. Same sort of things happening here, but it does feel extra cheap just because we're on this set, and it didn't feel like they thought about how it felt like they had a picture in their eye of how this would look, and when they got to set, they realized we can't do that, so we're going to do what we can.
It kind of feels like they picked a location for this fight where it could just be a black backdrop, and it's like, this is the cheapest possible thing that we can shoot is a set that's meant to be the moon, because there's very little there and there's a lot of control.
I feel like the easiest place you could shoot it would be like, oh, we're in Lacey's office in the Daily Planet because we already built that set, so we're just gonna do it again.
So he goes down and grabs Lacey, and flies up with her. What's so strange, though, about this is that he straight up flies her into space. And you can't even argue that, well, I mean, first of all, this wouldn't even work, right? Because even if you get so high in the altitude, you still can't breathe, right? See when you're on a plane, like, you can't just, like, open the window and take a whiff, right? One, it's too cold for a start. You're going to freeze to death. And two, the pressure and everything. There's a lot of things going on there, right? But even if you could argue, they're still kind of in the atmosphere, it just looks like space because they're so, like, near the rim of, like, the atmosphere. No. We see, like, when Superman, like, grabs her and flies her back to Earth, like, they're going, like, back towards the planet. Like she is screaming and kicking in the vacuum of space like it's no one's business.
So my initial thought as to what could have possibly been the idea here was that this was supposed to be them still around Metropolis. This was supposed to be like he grabbed her and flying across Metropolis, but they realized that they didn't get whatever backplates they needed of New York in order to sell that. And then they were like, okay, well then put it in space. It shouldn't be a big deal. However, when Superman launches his plan, he busts out of the moon and he's like, all right, I know that he's affected by light. How do I take away the sunlight? I'm going to push the moon to cause a total eclipse, and therefore he will have no more sunlight. Superman kills millions.
Okay. I wasn't even getting to this yet, but you're right. This is arguably the biggest sin of the movie as far as science is concerned, is Superman pushing the moon out of orbit. Do you not understand that this would have some effect on what's happening on Earth? That there's some things on Earth that happen on a regular basis as a result of the moon's orbit. The tides, for example, being the main thing.
Also, he just completely screwed up like the entire day-night cycle. Like anything that responds to astronomy or anything like that, it's like, well, that's just done. Do we still have a dark side of the moon? Are we tidal locked? What's happening anymore?
Look, I get that someone thought of the great visual of Superman pushing the moon, and it's this big spectacular looking thing. It's Superman using his strength. It's so big. It's so fantastical. Like, I get the wanting of the visual, but it's just so stupid from a scientific perspective of what it would be doing to Earth that it's hard to take seriously.
I mean, I'm fine with it from a viewpoint of like, you know, could Superman do this? Sure, why not? But it's worth noting that there was a comic called Forever Evil where this happened, but the Superman pushing the moon was an evil version from an evil Earth. Like, this isn't a good thing to do to Earth. Anyway, the one thing that I wanted to bring that up for is that he blocks the sun and he puts the moon in the way, and then he goes and rescues Lacey, but Nuclear Man's just kind of dangling. He's just in space and he's just floating there, which kind of sells away the point that he's definitely not in Metropolis because he's just floating there. It seemed like it was always intended to be in space now. And so I have no answers as to why in the hell they thought she could breathe in space.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know what to say anymore. Anyway, he disposes of Nuclear Man, which, see if he just sort of tried to lure him to the dark side of the moon, like, and then, like, you know, build something around him to, like, transport him where he wants to take him. Because it turns out the way to dispose of a Nuclear Man is you throw him into a nuclear reactor. I did like the joke, though, that everyone's lights turn on because this is like such an energy surge. that was a little funny to me.
My fiance grew up around 3 Mile Island, which I don't know if you're aware, had a little nuclear. It had a reactor. It had a little scare at one point.
We spell.
Yeah, just tiny bit. And as they are flying to the nuclear reactor, she's just like, "Oh God, are they going to do 3 Mile Island?" And I'm like, "No?" Question mark. I'm not sure.
Oh dear. Well, that's that. Nuclear Man's done. Lex and Lenny are trying to get away, and the car just picks up when they're on the run. And Superman's got them. He takes Lex back to the prison guards and says, "Here you go. Have him. See you in 20 years, Lex." And Lenny's taken to like a troubled home for boys. You know, they takes him to a priest. He's like, "Hey, can you help this young man?" He's like, "Everyone can be helped, Superman." He's like, "Yes, I believe that too." Off you go, Lenny.
Smash cut Lenny tied to a bed. The power of Christ compels you.
Yeah, and then the end of like the Superman stuff is him making a speech saying that he wanted to intervene, but it was maybe incorrect to do so. You know, hopefully one day the people of Earth will want peace so bad that the leaders will have to give it to them.
Yep. We also get the turnaround that Perry White apparently this entire movie has been consulting with lawyers and whatnot, and has managed to buy the company back from Daddy Morbucks, whatever his name is. Buy
enough shares that the rich guy's not a majority shareholder anymore, so that he can't.
Correct.
Basically, he convinced the banks and various people that the Daily Planet should be like a service, an institution, so it shouldn't be at the mercy of capitalist pigs.
Yep. And 5 years later, the internet took off and print media died.
Yeah, it's really funny to hear them talk about newspapers struggling in the 80s, because I'm like, well, if you think you're struggling now, you ain't even prepared for what's coming in about a decade.
That's the same thing. Every once in a while, I'll watch a sitcom or whatever from the 90s, and they'll be like, geez, can you believe these gas prices? I'm like, shut the hell up.
You know nothing.
Bastards.
You know nothing. Oh, dear. Anyway, that's Superman 4. I mean, it ends with the same two shots that the last three movies ended with. It's him flying around the earth and smiling as he flies past the camera. Nice. I mean, it's fine. Of course you do that. Of course, we don't have the kind of the perspective or the trails anymore in the end credits. We just have like a really bad glow effect turned up to full as they scroll up like normal movie credits, because we can't even afford that.
Honestly, I'd rather something this simple than them trying to do something fancy and it looking like trash. Like, no, this at least is simple enough. That's
fair. I'd rather just even do the glow though. Just give them the slight blue color and leave it at that. This makes it look cheap, because it's like you're trying to go for like a, you know, another worldly effect, but it's just so simple that it doesn't work. But it's just emblematic of like everything this movie feels, is that everything just doesn't have the juice.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
That said, though, I was never bored. Like, as shit as the movie is, it moves at a brisk pace. Some of the characters are still fun to watch. I like the bad villain. Like, I laugh at it. Like, all of it's entertaining in a bad way. So, I think there's much worse. As far as, like, just watching and getting some entertainment out of it, there is much worse. Obviously, as a Superman fan who wants a seriously good Superman movie, and hopefully in 2 weeks we're talking about a seriously good Superman movie, please, James, please.
I agree with you for the most part. I think the biggest thing for me is, like, again, the past three movies have been 2 hours plus. They have been at that length. This one coming in 90 minutes, it doesn't feel like it overstays its welcome. But I also think that if that 2 hour cut were to exist, I would be dreadfully bored. I think they went right up to the limit of what I could handle, and they stopped there. If they went any further with the time, I would be bored out of my mind.
It's a series of domino effects where some of the reasons why it's still watchable are also some of the reasons why it wouldn't be good if it had other things instead. You know, it's kind of a weird mishmash. Obviously, it's a bad movie, and I feel like, you know, like any like praise or any like saying, oh, it's an entertaining bad movie is going to sound too positive to some people because they think it's the worst thing ever made. Again, I'll just reiterate, if you think this is the worst movie ever made, then you ain't seen shit. Okay? I could show you horrors that you people wouldn't believe, right? I've seen cans of tuna and broken laptops on the shoulder of Orion. Okay, I've seen lines of dialogue in ADR that are lost like tears in the rain. I don't know why I'm doing a parody of the Blade Runner speech, but that's where it felt like it was going.
I kind of want to like dub this over, like give you the full treatment here.
Oh dear. So yeah, obviously it's a bad movie. It's laughably bad in places. But there's a little intention in there that I don't think's terrible, and I do think Christopher Reeve is still good in the role for all the silly things that it is doing, for all the silly qualities that it has. I would much rather watch Superman 4 than Steel again. I'll say it. I'll just say it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Steel is probably the better made movie, not by much, but I think that at the very least it felt like it had a handle on its budget when it went in, however cheap that may have been, and it knew what it could film, and it did that. This one, it just felt like it got away from them, and that's why we ended up with this sort of weird indeterminate project where it just doesn't feel like it was really even finished properly. Oh, and again, we mentioned Lacey does not show up again after she's rescued by Superman. She just is gone from the rest of the movie.
Yep.
I insist that she is dead.
She should have been dead the second she got a certain altitude in the atmosphere.
Yep, but probably.
Hey, maybe like Nuclear Man's like heat and energy were like warming her up. I mean, it doesn't explain the breathing, obviously, in space, but
yeah, no, it manages to give off nuclear decay that allows for oxygen and nitrogen to form. However, she also now has turbo cancer, so give and take there.
she's just off camera dying in a bed at the end, just like sort of like begging for her last words for Clark to come see her, but he's too busy being Superman. Oh dear.
This got dark. Let's get back to the jizz talk.
Back to the boners and the jizz.
Yeah.
All right, David, what are you rating Superman 4: The Quest for Peace?
I'm trying to think, because I really don't want to leave zero room for returns, but I have no idea how I'm going to feel about that one. So I think 4 for me comes in at a 4. It's not a good movie. I taking the enjoyability of it out of the equation. There is enough in there that it's not desperately low down the scale, but it's definitely not breaking that 5 either. So I think I'm just going to go with a down the line 4.
No, I agree with the 4. I think it's absolutely a 4 out of 10. It is a bad movie for numerous reasons, but there is much worse. And like we said, there are at least like intentions between the nuclear plot with Superman and Willard should intervene, the stuff with Lois that it was kind of like scratching at. Like, yes, obviously it's bad that they didn't fulfill what those things could really be, but there's definitely intentions here that you can't just like say, oh, they didn't even try. Like,
right.
Some people along the way were trying. I'm not sure if the director was one of those people, but some people along the way were definitely trying at some point. So I think 4 out of 10 is right. There is worse. There is a lot of worse. So
I like to think that the executives at Canon were like, well, you know, Superman's clearly going to do fantastically, so we don't have to worry about our next movie that comes out, which was actually Masters of the Universe. So, whoops.
Yeah, we actually have that on the schedule for next year because there's a new Masters of the Universe movie coming out.
Fantastic. I love it. Before we move on, though, does this make the cut?
I mean, no.
No, it doesn't. But the question is, does it just normal not make the cut, or does it get one of our special cut your losses, or it cuts deep? I think it's pretty clearly not it cuts deep. That's obvious.
No. I don't even know if I feel strongly enough to say cut your losses, to be honest. Like, it feels like it should be by reputation, but I think the reputation is because it's a bunch of normies who have never seen a proper bad movie.
God, I love gatekeeping. Yeah, no, it's I agree, but I think not for those same reasons. I think for me is that I feel very similar to this that I feel with Superman 3, but for just wildly different reasons. I feel like it's on the same sort of scale, though. So cut from the collection makes most sense.
Yep, that is absolutely fair. So yeah, that'll do your Superman 4 discussion, which means next week we have to talk about Superman Returns, which I've not seen in a long time. But yeah, there'll be thoughts. There'll be thoughts on that.
Will we discuss, I don't know, any prominent actors or maybe the director of the movie and anything that's happened in the meantime?
Look, yeah, there's some problematic people involved. I don't think we'll be spending much time talking about why they're problematic on the review next week. I think we'll just sort of focus on the end product. But yeah. But hey, join us next week for the worst live-action version of Lois Lane that's ever existed. So look forward to that.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember her at all, so fair enough, but like, wow.
Oh, gee, she's so fucking... I can't swear.
So Patreon-only Superman episode, everybody.
I didn't finish the word. I didn't get the last sound out.
I'm saying it's going to happen in the next one. Next one, you ain't going to be able to hold back. There is a black hole where the personality of Lois Lane is supposed to be, and her name is Kate Bosworth, okay? So, all right.
We have so much to discuss, presumably, next time. But Superman Returns is the last punishment we have to endure before we hopefully get to enjoy a Superman movie again the following week. So, and not even like a full week later, because we're going to be having the episode out on the Tuesday after the regular Saturday release of Superman 4. So hopefully you guys will enjoy revisiting this. And this obviously is different to us because this is the movie that came out when we were teenagers. I mean, I was 17 when Superman Returns came out. You'd have been, what, 13, 14, something like that?
Yeah, 13. I remember seeing it in theaters, and that's the only time I watched it.
I saw it in theaters too. And the one highlight I have is seeing the opening titles with the music in the theater, because I'd never seen a Superman movie on the big screen. That felt cool.
All right.
And then it was downhill from there.
Don't spoil it, Pete. Maybe we'll love it on a rewatch.
If I was to guess, I think I'm going to like it even less than I did the last time I watched it, which was like 15 years ago.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure it hasn't aged well at all. It's going to reek of that mid-2000s film quality where it's like, we're just trying different things. We'll see what sticks.
All right, well, that's next time on the show. You can, of course, support the show over at Patreon or via YouTube membership. Both options are completely valid, and you can get bonus shows like Extra Reels, where we review some of the worst movies ever made. Most of them much worse than Superman 4, if you can believe it. Maybe one or two weren't, but most of them absolutely were. But yeah, there's obviously the ratings rundown segments where we rate like the different categories. We do like a rating for visuals, audio, script, acting, all that kind of thing. We do that for each of the episodes now. We used to do it in the show, but to keep the shows a little bit, tighter in time, because we go significantly over 2 hours a lot of the time now. We cut that
Opinionated.
out. It's a little bonus segment you get now, so it's like an extra feature for most episodes of Ace and Collector's Cut that you can get over on Patreon or via YouTube membership. And of course, you can support us as a one-time thing with a super thanks on YouTube if you'd rather do that. Any support is greatly appreciated, so thank you very much for any you give us. And thank you for watching and listening to the show. It is greatly appreciated. I'll also mention that I put out a survey for both patrons and the public recently, a few weeks ago now. But it'll still be there. It'll still be running. You can go back and fill that in if you haven't. You can find it in the community section of YouTube, or if you're a patron, you can find it just on a Patreon post. So if you want to go fill that out and tell us which shows you like on Male Fuzz Movies and TV and whatnot, then please do. But yeah, that's the show, everyone. That has been the Collector's Cut. Thank you very much for joining us. We do appreciate it. Keep watching movies, and if you can get it, it's always nice to have beachfront property.